Get ready to remove the filter from your timeline. Get ready to break the censorship of social media. Get ready to support the grassroots alternative to establishment propaganda. Get ready for an authentic voice. Get ready to resist cancel culture. Get ready for free speech media. This is FSM.
From the heart of Trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
As the left becomes less religious, they become more statist. And as the right becomes more religious, they still become more statist.
Whenever you add government, you by default remove community.
But it actually starts with Bush, right? Like in 2006.
That'd be the most satisfying, like, chair shot, ka-chung.
And I have no intention of keeping any promise that I make.
The radical messaging is almost more pragmatic sometimes.
It's bad that the state is as big as it is.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching The Naturalist Capitalist. I am your host, Reed Coverdale, streaming to you live from PorkFest in Lancaster, New Hampshire. And this is our fourth installment of the Four Horsemen series. On the show again, we got my good friend, Eric Jackman. How you doing, Eric?
Reed, I'm psyched. I'm honored. This is going to be an epic night, and it's sponsored by beer from Mexico called Modelo.
As long as it's not Corona.
Nope, we got rid of the Corona. We brought in the Modelo. Reed, we're going to fucking let it rip tonight, man. I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this, and this is going to be great.
Absolutely. I don't know what to expect, but under an interesting surname, we've got Ryan Dawson of the Anti-Neocon Report. Are you there, Ryan?
Is Ryan still with us?
I think his oh, here we go.
Oh, he's so based.
It's the Four Horsemen. I had to get it in there.
Yeah.
So
Scott
Ryan
Horton's coming on the show.
Yeah, Ryan mentioned that I made that Americans made his latest Twitter account for him. That was actually me. I made it for him, but it only lasted 12 days, so she's gone. But
That's
he's still here with us.
That's a day longer than the one before it.
And our special guest today is the one and only Scott Horton. How you doing, Scott? Oh, we can't hear you, Scott.
He said, "I'm
that's
doing
because
good.
my
How are
mic
you?"
is off. I do that sometimes.
Oh,
How are you boys? I'm doing good.
this is
We're good.
this is
Cheers.
quite the amazing lineup we got here. Can't believe it.
Got
This
a
is the-
beverage ready. It tastes better in this cup.
This is the Avengers Initiative on steroids.
I gave
Eric-
Matt Smith one of these. It's got my logo on the other side. He's like, "It's got your logo on the other side." I go, "Yeah, I am a capitalist." Of course.
So,
it's there.
Eric, I wanted to start off with you. You've got a little story for us about some of the things that happened here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, Ryan, I've held off on telling you this, man. So I have a live comedy podcast show coming up. I do a podcast with my twin brother, Mike Jackman, called Jackman Radio. And we have been in the planning stages of a huge live comedy podcast show. And we had booked a venue in Keene, New Hampshire, all booked, good to go. Tickets were sold. People had bought tickets. My brother and I hired a high-end professional film crew to come up to New Hampshire from Philadelphia and New York to film it. And we're going to release it as a special. And we got word last week that Jackman Radio is no longer welcomed at the venue.
Oh no!
We got an email from the booker, and the booker said, "Yeah, I got to tell you guys, we're worried about a guest you've had on your show before."
Mm.
I said, "Oh, I wonder who that would be," and it was Mr. Ryan Dawson.
Another notch.
And they said, yeah, we take issue with the fact that you've had Ryan Dawson on your show, and we're kind of worried about him, and this and all the usual tropes, this and that. Mentioned you have a Confederate flag, you've talked about the Unabomber, all that stuff.
We do Civil War history videos. You call
Civil
them.
War none of that matters. So they canceled us, and we scrambled for a couple days, and we found a new venue, and the Jaffrey, New Hampshire Legion will take us, and we're going to do our show there. But I'm not going to back down here, Ryan. I support the work you do. I support free speech. I believe in freedom of speech, and I pointed out to them that if you disagree with someone or you object to something they're saying, instead of going into a corner with a big gallon of soy and crying and hiding your head in the sand, you should talk and have conversation and have discourse.
Yeah, usually dialogue and sunshine is the quickest way to end that stuff. It's people going in their echo chambers is why they build and build, because nobody ever confronts them.
Yeah. So, obviously, Ryan, you and I, we don't agree on everything. We're not going to agree on everything, but we agree on the First Amendment in our Constitution. And I agree. I am an absolutist when it comes to freedom of speech. So it's their right as a private venue to not have us. And we found a new place. But so that's what we got going on. We were able to get a new venue. We got a new sound guy. The film crew's still coming. Jackman Radio prevails, and it's going to be a fucking epic night, and it's going to be a great special. And cheers to the First Amendment, guys.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Hey, and not just free speech, but free association too. And what's
That's
all
right.
this with you talk to somebody that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
So what?
On a
Give me
radio
break.
show.
Exactly, Scott.
Childish
Scott,
and
exactly.
silly.
It's childish, it's infantile, it's stupid, it's soy, it's all the above. But
Scott talked to Michael Ledeen. I can't talk to Scott anymore, even though they disagreed on everything.
No, I never talked to Michael Ledeen. The old lady did, though.
Oh, did I get that back? I think you did talk to Ledeen.
I did.
Sure. Yeah, way back.
He's only had like 5,000 episodes. I don't know why
he could remember all of them.
No, I mean, my old lady interviewed him for Raw Story back a long time ago, but I don't think I ever talked to Michael Ledeen.
I think so. Anyway, we could say,
right,
his old lady talks to him. That's 2 Kevin Bacon degrees away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do concede that I got what Biden got, and I can't remember half the shit I used to know. So I don't know. Maybe I did.
So, Scott, what's
right.
censorship been like for you? Have you dealt with it a lot, or do they leave you alone at all, or how seriously are they gone after you?
I don't think anybody cares what I say enough to try to censor me, really. I mean,
They went after antiwar.com.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, as part of antiwar.com, I got, and I guess I'd like to think that I was the reason why, but I'm sure I wasn't. It's Justin who is doing the heroic work on the most important stuff there. And I mean, I got it all right on my show. And it was really when Russiagate started and they did the proper not, fake thing that they published in the Washington Post, where they just talked about, well, this anonymous group just names everyone who ever tells Russia's side of the story in any way as all, fronts for Russian propaganda. And they've been going after a lot of kind of right-wing personalities, I guess, starting with Alex Jones and then Milo and, all those guys. And then they were, first of all, they were trying to push Russiagate. And then second of all, they wanted to show that they were being fair and they weren't just persecuting the Republicans. They were persecuting leftists too. And so they went after Truth Out and Truth Dig and the World Socialist website, and then threw an antiwar.com because I guess they don't know a libertarian from a leftist, or they just wanted to get us anyway. And so then, and really it was the World Socialists, they're a Trotskyite sect, who I think did the best journalism on this. Consortium News was thrown in there. Bob Perry, now Joe Loria's site. But it was the World Socialists that did the best reporting on how they deranked us all on Google and, put all of this stuff. There's so many key words where antiwar.com would be the first thing that comes up. We got hundreds of thousands of pages of articles on there. I don't know the count, but a very high number. And so they just deranked us to the second page and this kind of thing, which on Google is death. and it really hurt. And they had the analytics from the Alexa and whatever different versions, that Google Analytics or whatever, that showed that all of those sites were just suffering terribly from that. And that was starting in, I think they started pushing that. Rye, tell me if you remember better, but I think that Prop or Not shit came out like must have been I can't remember anymore if it was before or after the election of 2016, but it was the beginning of 2017, right after the intelligence report that said that they intervened to help Trump, something like that. Must have been in early 2017 they put that out. And so yeah, that's been a problem for us. And of course, on Twitter there's the question of shadow banning and all of that. And then, people that we're associated with that would be amplifying our message, that then they get booted off of Twitter. I was booted off of there for a little while. I guess Dan McAdams, who's, one of our closest friends and colleagues who runs the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity with Ron Paul, they kicked him off permanently for calling Sean Hannity a retard. Which, look, if you call an actual retarded person retard, then somebody should probably punch you in the face, right? Like, you shouldn't do that. But Sean Hannity is not developmentally challenged. He's just a bad, stupid, horrible person. And so in that case, he was really just using a creative term for stupid, which, there's probably no retarded people reading Dan McAdams' Twitter to have their feelings hurt by that anyway. Like, what's really the harm in that? But they use that as the excuse. Oh, and you know what the occasion was too? It was Hannity was incensed that the CIA had gone after Trump. And he's saying that CIA, they're the deep state and they're the bad guys in all this. But he's got literally has a CIA lapel pin on his suit at the time that he's talking. And McAdams is going, look, you dumb. You're going to have to pick one or the other kind of points of view here. You can't have both at the same time, was all it was. But yeah, I'm just complaining and rambling now. But I just
a friend of Dan Adams and myself.
Dan was a great Twitterer, man. A great one.
Michael Kyle was kicked off Twitter after he had died, just from something,
Michael who?
Whatever. Michael Kyle, the Irish journalist. He's friends with McAdams, and that was his record, and he had already passed away, and then they got rid of that.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. I never can pronounce his name because it's spelled all funny, but
yeah, it's spelled like it looks like Michael O'Cathale or something, but it's in Irish. Yeah, he had, and of course
Peter Van Buren, absolute firebrand, former State Department official and whistleblower. Mm-hmm. We Meant Well is the book, and he got thrown off. This guy tattletaled on him because he said he was in the middle of watching a zombie show, Walking Dead or one of these. And one of these crybabies was on some Russiagate thing, whatever it was. And Van Buren said, I hope a MAGA guy eats your face. And the guy, it was Jonathan Katz is the guy's name, went and tattletaled to the Twitter police that this guy's threatening to sick zombies on me or something. And got, one of our best guys thrown off of Twitter permanently for that.
I had like 1,000 people giving me physical threats from Black Lives Matter, and none of them got banned, but I did.
Yeah,
they said they wanted me dead. We're going to beat me up. And I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to do anything. So all they could do is get me kicked off Twitter for the umpteenth time. They complain about election interference, and Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube banned the president. They banned congressmen. They banned both of the Republicans in the Georgia Senate race got kicked off Facebook, had their fundraising page in the middle of an election that would decide who was going to run the Senate. And, Russiagate kept getting bigger and bigger. Not only did they supposedly make Hillary lose in 2016, but Hunter's laptop is supposed to be Russian propaganda. That was officially said in the debates. And then they have all these debates, and we didn't do anything on foreign policy. They talked about the Proud Boys more than our entire foreign policy. And I don't think most people had ever even heard of that group until they brought it up on the debate stage. It's just some insignificant nothing group.
Well, as much as they rigged, and I don't know about the vote count, but just the entire, the way the media and the establishment rigged the whole season against Trump and the way they did, he still is number one by far in first place for people who lost that election for him. And that was especially by means of suppressing all the mail-in voting and just telling people that mail-in voting is corrupt, it's evil, it's bad, it's gay, it'll give you the cooties, whatever you do. If you don't want to show up and vote for me on election day, don't bother. You know, that was his message for months. And that absolutely must have been worth 4 or 5 points in all 50 states, you know, across the board for him to do that. At one point, he went to Florida and DeSantis said, don't say that here, man. We win by mail here. And this is really bad. And anybody could just think it through, that the people who skew wealthy and Republican are also skew old and afraid of the germ and have the most incentive to stay home rather than show up and vote in person. And so what he could have done was said, look, and in fact, he's such a BS artist, he could have said, we're going to win by mail and we're going to win in person. But at least on the, you know, playing that, you know, on the game, that he would at least get a good percentage of the mail-in votes. Listen, if you can't vote in person, by all means, vote by mail. If your cousin's too stubborn to show up and vote in person, but you can get him to vote by mail, get him to vote by mail. If he'd done all of that, he would have won by far. And instead, he suppressed his own stupid vote, basically saying, well, mail-in voting is bad, really, really bad, really, really, really bad. And then hopefully somehow after election day, when all the mail-in ballots start coming in, leaning hard to the left, then I'll just throw a temper tantrum and say that they shouldn't count. And
Eric,
somehow,
can you
even though,
say what Trump said? About
yeah, I mean,
mail?
the governors and the secretaries of state are not in his chain of command at all. But he thinks that somehow they're just going to throw out millions of ballots for him when no, they're not going to. And
Look,
they
Scott,
didn't.
I made a little call to Fartzenberger there in Pennsylvania, and I said, look, I need you to find 230,000 votes. Exactly. Okay, just find them. I don't care where you have to look. If you have to look under the couch where the clicker is, maybe Jesus is down there. He could be down there too. I don't know. Maybe some loose change is down there. Ryan, we know you love loose change. We know you love loose change. But find the votes for me, Scott, okay? And we will win this thing. And the whole thing was rigged. It was totally rigged. It was a disaster. And we know what happened. And I really won, okay? I really won. I won the thing. Well, they're doing it up here in New Hampshire, in Windham, where Corey Lewandowski is from, Trump's #1 bagman here from the state. They're doing the audit, and I just think it's a giant waste of time. I don't think anything's going to come from the audit, like Maricopa County in Arizona, and I don't know. What do you guys think about that? Is that just a giant waste of time, or is anything going to come from it?
Sounds like someone's not trusting the plan.
Trust the plan, Infowars.com.
You know,
I mean,
I thought
I
they
don't-
might blame that on Russia too, but they said they're blaming the Capitol riot. They're saying it's white supremacists. I'm like, hold on now. It wasn't a bunch of white supremacists. It was, I mean, they were dumb as white supremacists, but I didn't see any of that. There was a bunch of like QAnon people and stuff. And they went there because they legitimately, in their mind, believed there was voter fraud and they wanted it to contest it. And they did that because the media and social media did not allow any dialogue. Like if you want to put that to rest, then you have open discussion and you explain how Biden got all these votes only in swing states, only in these cities, in the middle of the night with only his team counting. And you have audits and you allow that because there's nothing to hide. They didn't do any of that. They didn't even let people ask about it. So that's why it got to the point where they physically showed up and did something stupid. Then we find out later, well, there was COINTELPRO in there egging it on the whole time. They were never going to allow a discussion with Ted Cruz and the rest of them about voter fraud. And that was not going to happen. If they couldn't get the people there, the FBI would stage it themselves, which is often the case. And the only person in media I think that's mentioned that is Tucker Carlson, who's often out there on his own.
Well, the thing is, too, though, is Trump could have and should have conceded long before that for him to even show up that day and ask people to show up that day. And I don't think he wanted them to go inside the building. When he said, let's go down to the Capitol and fight, he meant stand there and chant. That's the American way, you know, go and
Pennsylvania
protest.
Avenue is what
Still,
he said.
Yep,
yeah,
go
like
down there.
what do you think's going to happen? That somehow they're going to disrupt the ceremony where Pence does not count the electoral votes. And then what? July 20th or January 20th will be canceled and he'll get to stay president for the next 4 years.
No, they just need
under
what
no
they need to
possible
happen.
circumstance was that going to be the outcome. The Electoral College had already voted. he'd already lost. And even if he wanted, let's say it was really right that he really had reason to believe that they stole 4 or 5 or 6 states or whatever on the margin and that he should have won. Still, once the Electoral College votes, then you got cheated fair and square and it's over. There's nothing left to fight about there. And I don't know if you guys saw this. I don't know, but it was Maggie Haberman, the Trump reporter at the Times, claimed this. And then a reporter for the National Review said, this is true, man. I got multiple sources saying this to me too, that Trump is talking about, at least telling people, that he thinks the military is going to reinstate him in August once it's proven how stolen from him all these states are. And then people are believing this. Of course, there's nothing in the Constitution that, in fact, as the guy in the National Review put it, that even if they came up with a videotape of Biden making a secret deal with the Venezuelans and the Chinese to steal all the ballots and steal the election, there's still nothing you could do about it. There's no reinstate clause in the Constitution for that. All you could do would be impeach and remove him and wait till the next election. But you couldn't, under no possible conceivable instance would there be any mechanism, any legal mechanism or constitutional mechanism to give the presidency back to Trump. But he's telling his people to believe this.
Did you guys see Into the Storm on HBO by Colin Hoback, all about Q? He went over to Japan. He met with the Watkins father,
I read a little bit about
the Watkins son. I mean, I just took people who still harp on about Q. I say, watch that fucking documentary. Everyone who buys into the Q bullshit, who's been proliferating it, talking about it, these are the fucking losers who played you. Ron and Jim Watkins, father and son duo. They played you guys.
How many people do you
And
guys
Lynn
actually
Wood,
know
Sidney
really
Powell.
believe it, though? Like, I don't know. I don't think I know anyone who really believes
the
Q.
thing is, it's like a false flag. Like QAnon's retarded.
Yeah,
that stuff's stupid. That doesn't mean totally independent from Q that there are not legitimate reasons to believe they rig elections.
Well, of course they do. Yeah.
What happened was it wasn't like they're going to reinstate Trump. It's that for people to have faith in the system, they needed to allow the argument to be made and discussed to show, here's what happened. Look, you actually lost, and show that to everybody and allow a dialogue. So at least they feel like, well, we had a senator and 50 different congressmen, because that's what they had. All, they contested Arizona and this and that. More people voted, some dead people voted, whatever. That happens all the time. And just explain the whole thing and put it to rest. But instead, they're like, you're not allowed to talk about it. And they do this. They did it with voter fraud. They did it with the COOF, with COVID. And now
the thing is, they did file,
maybe it did get leaked out or not, but we don't know because you're not allowed to discuss it.
I mean, the Trump people filed 60-something lawsuits or whatever.
Yeah, but that was cute. That was Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood. It was like these are retard lawsuits, right? And that's why they got dismissed. Like, these are the same people that said Obama was a birther and a secret Muslim, and we're dealing with double-digit.
I mean, that's really not right. That's really not right. I mean, the state parties hired lawyers who were from their states to take this to court all over the country. So I think that Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell stuff obviously was part of it. But there were many cases in state court where the judges were just saying, look, where's the beef, man? And the lawyers were saying, yeah, actually, we don't have any. We just want you to throw out all the black votes because we don't like how black people vote. Okay, well, see you next time, boys. Good luck.
I mean, 2004, you had demonstrable fraud in Ohio. The Green Party had to launch that recount with Kerry and Bush. You guys remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That was legit voter fraud, right?
What about Iowa?
The fact that you don't have voter ID in some states and counties is ridiculous already. And they're saying that's Jim Crow. It is not Jim. You can't compare that to Jim Crow laws. You have to have an ID to vote one time. That's normal in any country that allows votes in the world has voter ID, except the U.S.
So since we're all here, what do you guys think is the libertarian response to voter fraud? What can liberty-minded people? What's the answer and solution to this?
I just had one quick question before that. I'm wondering what it would take to convince Trump supporters that he lost. Kind of just like it takes to convince COVID people that COVID is not the end of the world. I mean, it's an honest question. I'm not even making a statement. I'm just wondering
for him to say
what legitimate argument would it take for Trump supporters and Trump to be like, okay, we lost. I mean, I don't feel like an audit would have done it. I just don't. I mean, even if
you have to allow dialogue, It's like nobody can have confidence in a conclusion that you're not allowed to discuss, even if you are right, like global warming alarmists or whatever, right?
I agree with
there's
you.
people who think COVID's not the end of the world. Some people think it's a hoax. There's it's like stupid on both sides there, but it's because there's no discussion. They're like, it's not a fucking hoax. Like, I had it. It's the real thing. It's also not the end of the world. Right. But the hoaxer side is not allowed to talk. The alarmists are. So it just gets more and more in that direction, further and further that way. Same thing with global warming. It is getting warmer. No, it's not going to be gone in 10 years and some of the exaggerations that they've said and stuff. But because you're not allowed to discuss it at all, unless you're, in one direction, it gets further and further toward that side of the kook meter. And there's a lot of topics like that. If you don't allow dialogue, how can anybody have confidence in your conclusion when they're like, yeah, but like even Mark Zuckerberg had questions about vaccinations, right? And I guess he had them personally answered, but he didn't allow his whole Facebook audience to have the same questions and have them addressed. So like if I can't ask this looks like you're hiding something. So if you don't allow, again, free speech and dialogue, no one is going to have confidence in the conclusion you come up with because they're like, yeah, but you didn't let us challenge that at all. Not even allowed to ask about it. They'll do a little thing on Twitter, say this is disinformation, and they see them. It's their media's fault that people are so radicalized. Like they lied about all these wars, right? WMDs in Iraq, etc. And so they're like, I don't know what to think anymore, and that's why they gravitate to the Alex Joneses and loose changes and weirdos and stuff because they're constantly lied to on television. Joe Biden said Hunter's laptop is Russian propaganda. No, it's not. That is his laptop. That is him on the laptop doing drugs and hookers and the rest of it, right? The Bidens are a criminal syndicate. So is Trump, right? And it's amazing to me that none of that came up when they're debating. They didn't talk about Trump's association with Bob LaBooty and the mafia in New York or any of that. And they didn't talk about Biden and Whitey Bulger and any of that. Nuh-uh. It's all just surface level identitarian things that don't really matter.
The mayor of Moscow is what Trump said a whole bunch of times.
she that one's true. Actually, they did receive a lot of money from Russia. And
but Trump has been a laundromat for the
CFR admitting he got rid of the prosecutor in Ukraine. Right, and not only that, but we had 5 hours translated into English from the anti-corruption agency in Ukraine about the Bidens and all their deals, and it doesn't matter. It's not on TV, so no one sees it.
Right, and Trump's been a laundromat for Soviet money for forever. Sorry, Scott, go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, that's true. I mean, Trump had, Russian money anyway, and going back to
the Soviet Union,
Yeah, I mean, on the Hunter Biden laptop thing, importantly, there was no plausible explanation whatsoever why anyone would believe that was Russian at all. There was no narrative. No one even said, well, look, I mean, obviously, probably what happened was the Russians made up all this stuff, dropped it off at this place in Delaware for repairs and to set it right. Like no one even tried to explain it in a way with a real story. It was just that Clapper and Brennan and those guys released a letter that said it looks like Russian disinformation to us. And in fact, I remember seeing on Reddit the standard point of view mocking oh yeah, right. Let me get this straight. Hunter Biden just leaves his laptop at this computer repair place in Delaware, even though he lives in California, and just like it just goes without saying. We know obviously if even the CIA guys are saying this must have come from the Russians, then clearly it did. And anyone trying to deny that and say that it's actually seems like it probably is his laptop, that's total crazy kook conspiracy land. And just you kind of got to marvel at it and give them credit for being that successful with the public relations when there really was no narrative that even made any sense whatsoever how this thing could have come from Russia. And it's already on the record. We already know that this guy is a crackhead. We already know that he was cheating with on his wife with his dead brother's widow and all of this stuff,
and a hooker who he got pregnant and then denied it was him.
No, but dude, Hunter's an absolute. He's an absolute legend.
He dropped off his laptop. No, that's crazy. That could never happen.
He's a complete legend. I love reading about how Biden's former Secret Service detail when he was VP, codename Celtic, or Celtic. Those guys are now private. They had to go out to California and clean up fucking Hunter's mess out there when he was at some high-end hotel, and he paid some call girl a bunch of times through a Cash App, or it didn't go through, and then too much went through, and it paid her $25,000 or something. But I just make the point to people that the children of all the elites, of all the politicians, they grew up in a freak circus. So a lot of them are not going to be well-adjusted adults or human beings. They're going to be crack puppets like Hunter Biden, and they're going to behave in a certain way because
when your dad marries your babysitter after your mom dies in a car crash, that might do something to you. I don't know, but like, you know, he's hanging out Marina Del Rey City Club with Peter Nygaard, who's shitting in people's mouths and stuff, and he's in jail now, but Hunter isn't. It doesn't matter. It's like he could eat a baby and they would be like, I don't know, maybe that baby, you know, was a human shield or something.
Babies, I have the documents. I got the documents that are eating babies in 4 years.
By the way, you know, since you brought it up, right, and I'm sure you probably already read this, but that car wreck, and what had happened was the wife was driving. I think the boys were in the back seat, and she ran a stop sign and pulled out in front of a truck and got hit. Which is a tragic thing. The wife and the daughter died. She was really young. I think she was like a toddler. Was the daughter's age this time?
December 9th.
But then Biden spent decades lying and smearing the truck driver, and he would tell the story that this truck driver had drank his lunch that day, and so he wasn't paying attention. He killed my wife and all this stuff. When that just wasn't true at all. The guy hadn't had a drop. And she was the one who had run the stop sign, which, whatever, an accident is just an accident, right? It's not like blame her. It was, you know,
Frank Biden ran into a man and killed him and left 2 daughters orphaned and wouldn't pay the family.
Yeah, I mean, and so, but this guy for years, and his family, I think after he died, finally his family came out and complained about it. But he had just sat there and taken it in silence for years, being smeared by a U.S. senator that he was essentially a child killer through his criminal negligence, when this is, of course, the worst thing that ever happened to him. And it happened to him, right? It wasn't something that he did. It happened to him. And
he could have died.
But to Joe Biden, this is nothing to just smear this guy for decades and call him an alcoholic and a lush and a loser and a scumbag for killing his wife and baby.
While his brother is guilty of what he's accusing the other guy of, and he helps him hide and launder his money. Then they get involved with the Sanford
Wait,
Ponzi
talk about
scheme.
that. Your Joe Biden's brother killed somebody like that?
Frank, but you got to see Corn Pop's Revenge. It went all into the Bidens. Joe Biden's brother hit a man. Was it in Florida, Eric? You saw the thing. Florida or California. He hit a guy who had 2 daughters, and
it was Florida.
They didn't have. Yeah, it was in Florida. He runs over him and kills him, and orphans these 2 kids, and then totally refused to pay. And he's going like 90. It was totally his fault. He refused to pay. And then he lives in this giant house. He's got these nice cars and everything. He acts like he has no money. They went to try to garnish it, and he had $28 in his bank account because he moved it all around. The other Bidens helped him move the money around. But this is a family. Beau Biden dies of brain cancer. They set up a cancer research fund, collect $4 million, and spent none of it on research. I mean, there is no bottom to these people, and none of that came out because
exploiting your own son's death that way, just for the cash.
I can't
by the way,
imagine.
how do you get brain cancer? He got brain cancer from fighting in Biden's wars in Kosovo and Iraq War II.
I'll tell you what, though, Ryan, I'm so goddamn proud of Hunter. I'm so proud of him. He's the smartest man I've ever known. He's got a memoir coming out. It's called Iraq, Barack, and Crack. It's coming out soon. Coming out soon. Yeah, the Biden thing. I mean, it's people just the press is giving the dude a tongue bath. I mean,
here's my favorite, the recent one. I don't have a favorite. The guy's almost as bad as Richard Pearl. Like that whole family together is like half as bad as Richard Pearl is just by himself. But the most recent thing is Hunter Biden's texts come out. Yeah, he called somebody the N-word a few times. Then he referred to Asians as yellow. But I'm like, whatever. That's private email to somebody or something. It's not that bad. But compared to him saying, hey, go get me some sex slaves, but no yellow ones. And what they're outraged about is that he referred to Asians as yellow, not the go get me some sex slaves part.
Right.
God damn.
That's the whole conversation in the text message is choosing the race of the person he's gonna get. You know.
But that's what they're outraged about. Ralph Nader said that to a group of college kids. He just went on this long talk of all this anti-corporate, anti-war stuff, and they got on his case about some word he had used or whatever. Maybe he said Negro because he's old and that's what they used to say, or colored people or something like that. He said colored people instead of people of color. It's the same damn thing, whatever. And he's like, that's what gets a rise out of young people. I just listed all these wars and all these people that are now dead because of these lies and profiteers. And you just sit there quiet and, but yeah, a racial slur, ethnic slur, sexual slur. That's what gets you out of your seat. Like, they can make slavery gay again in Libya, right? Sell a human being for $400 and murder. I don't even know how many people died in Libya. Maybe Scott knows, but a lot more than none, and
thousands at least, man.
Thousands at least. And then and we don't even get numbers on that because they don't care, right? They hand the country over to Al Qaeda, kill Gaddafi, which isn't our business to be doing. And they're like, well, at least he didn't use a racial slur. He killed a bunch of Africans and made slavery happen in North Africa again. But hey, at least they had good language. Someone else, it says, they accused Trump of saying they're rapists. I think he said there are rapists, whatever. He's basically a Nazi, and all his supporters are Nazi. They freaked out more on the kid that was wearing a MAGA hat, just standing still on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, having people yell at him, and another guy, a Mapeaneo, banging a drum in his face, just for sitting there, and because he smirked at some point. Like, this, how bad they freak out. They so desperately need a witch to burn, and it has to be identitarian crap because they can't talk about anything serious, which is what this guy was writing about.
It's because they're stupid, right? I mean, if you're going to sit here and talk about, natural rights theory or your version of the history of the war between the states or some kind of complicated thing, that's all complicated. But use a bad word, call somebody a bad name, fly the wrong flag, some kind of thing. Didn't you hear that Jimmy cheated on Sally or where? Anybody can talk about that. You don't have to know anything, right? And so that's always easy for people to knee jerk against. You know what I mean?
Killed a bunch of
people. If I'm going to talk about Libya, I'm going to have to know something about Libya first, and I don't
know where it is. Yeah,
But
I feel like some of them, you're right. Some of them are just stupid, but I think it's not for a lot of them, it's not an intellectual issue. It's a psychological issue. Like, they're smart enough to know that slavery in this century is wrong. Like, they can rant and rave about how bad it was in the 19th century because there's no skin in the game. That issue's been resolved. They can't rant and rave about making slavery in Libya because their team did it. It's got a D next to his name, and then they're responsible for something, and they don't want to be responsible for anything. Yeah. You can shit all over the Nazis because there aren't any Nazis anymore, and you can shit all over slavery in the 19th century, which was global, by the way, and was in the North and South. That was another thing. They just had a holiday, Juneteenth, when slavery ended in Texas, and I'm like, it didn't end in the United States until December, right? Because all those northern slave states, Kentucky, Delaware, Maryland, New Jersey, Missouri, Washington, D.C., West Virginia, they all had slaves until the 13th Amendment was passed, which it wasn't passed on its first try because 4 northern states shot it down. That's not why they were fighting. Well, if you're going to celebrate the end of slavery, then do it on December 6th. But no, it's got to be in June because that's when the Confederacy got rid of slaves. And like in Texas wasn't even Texas. Half of Texas was still Comanche territory and still had slaves.
Can I interject here? We just got a nice shout out from Maria Farmer on Twitter. She's watching us, guys. So I want to give her some love. She's an Epstein survivor, and she's watching us and supporting us. So I want to give her some love. And Scott, I wanted to ask you, Scott. You were on someone's show. I don't remember who it was, or someone was on your show, and you had said a villager in Afghanistan had no idea 9/11 even happened. And the way the translator could explain it to him, he said a plane hit a building in a village called New York City. So I wanted to just ask you about that. Like, what was that all about, and where in Afghanistan was that?
Sure. So now there's polls going back for years and years that I guess the last one that I saw who knows about polls in Afghanistan, but must be in the ballpark, where 92% of Afghans had never heard of the September 11th attacks on the United States, and had no idea that there were a few Arabs hiding out in the Nangarhar province circa the end of 2001. Made no difference to them. And it depends on where you go and who you ask, but there are a lot of places in Afghanistan where they're really not part of a nation of Afghanistan at all, where they're really tiny little independent, can't call them city states, but like valley states, from valley to valley to valley, where they just have their own little traditions and their own little dialect and their own little history. And for example, I've heard this over and over and over again, and read this over again, and had veterans tell me their own version of this exact same story, including Matthew Ho, the great whistleblower, that wherever our guys would go in Afghanistan, they'd be mistaken for Russians because the locals didn't even know that the Russians had left or that the Americans had arrived, even though the Russians have been gone for 20 years and the Americans had been there for 10. And they're like, oh no, the Russians have arrived in our valley, they have no idea what's going on here. So then the anecdote that you're talking about is Frank Ledwidge, who is a British Royal Navy intelligence officer who was stationed down in the Helmand province right at the dawn of the surge. And the way he explained the story to me was, when I tell the Helmandis, because they asked me, why are you guys back here? Because, of course, this is old British hunting grounds, losing grounds from their previous imperial adventures.
Killer of empires.
Yeah, and especially in the Helmand province specifically, where you can point at a former British fort up there and go, you guys know the story of your last stand there when we killed every last one of you, right? And which to the Afghans is the day before yesterday, even though it was 150 years ago or whatever. But anyway, so why are you back here? And then Frank Ledwidge would explain to them that, well, some Arabs crashed a plane or some planes into some buildings in a village called New York, in a valley far away from here. And then they would say, well, what the hell does that have to do with us? Right? Because unlike what Americans might think with, Durka, jihad, and everything is all one little space here, the Afghans aren't Arabs. The Afghans live on the far side of Persia from where the Arabs live. And they just have nothing to do with this.
They're not Al Qaeda
might as well be bombing the Brazilians, right? It's completely disconnected. Right. Now, it's true that there were Al Qaeda guys in Afghanistan back then, but that didn't make them indigenous to Afghanistan or part of Afghan culture or society in any real way whatsoever. And then what I really like about it, right, is first of all, the true innocence, right? That here we are, we're at war against these people in their own, down in the Helmand province where Al Qaeda never was. This has nothing to do with the people who attacked us. And it has so little to do with the people who attacked us that the people that we're attacking have no idea what we're even talking about. And then to me, this is the real rub, right? Is that, and yes, I'm an American, but I'm from Texas, and maybe this is prejudicial, but I think this still probably holds, right? That New York is the most important city in the world. This is the financial capital of the world. This is where the United Nations was headquartered after the end of the Second World War. This is the seat of the American Empire, the American World Empire. And these Helmandis have never even heard of it. A village called New York in a valley far away, because they've never even heard of the New World. They have no idea that America, north or south, even exists at all. And yet somehow, by some kind of collective guilt, they've got to tolerate the British Army and the American Marine Corps waging this full-scale war against them for having the temerity to defend their own land, to stand on their own damn front lawn.
Yeah.
And
what's sad is that
interpretation,
that interpretation of a couple planes. Excuse me, I think I'm allergic to Israel. Couple of planes hit some buildings in a village called in New York. Now those Afghan peasants are more educated on 9/11 than anybody that watched Loose Change, because they got more. That's more accurate than that film. The only thing that Loose Change got correct about 9/11 was the date.
Hey, that's my line that you stole from me.
I had not heard you say that. I've been saying that a long time.
Wait, maybe you also watched all 4 versions of that and concluded the same thing. That, well, they got the date of the attack right. It was September 11, 2001.
I definitely have seen it, and I can't stand those people. I have to put up with their minions every day. They say things, it's not even their own words. No building never fell from fire. It went its own footprint. And I'm like, these aren't even your own words. Pull it, Larry Silver. I'm like,
but that stuck with me, Scott.
I think we should get Jason Burmis on here for one of the Four Horsemen episodes just to make things kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'll invite Jason on.
I have like pictures of the hole in the Pentagon, like just.
I know,
chair.
Ryan, you have issues. But I'm buddies with the loose change guys. I know them personally. They're actually great guys.
Well, Burma and Whitney Webb were supposed to be on an Epstein roundtable.
One of them,
both of them ran away.
Look,
this John Bolton guy who's throwing money, he's loaded, whoever he is. So thanks for all the money, buddy.
John Bolton's a loser, by the way.
One of the loose change guys admitted to, I think, Slate back in like 2012 or 13 that was all bullshit. Yeah, we were wrong about that.
Well, look, Burmis is a good researcher.
I sat next to one of those guys on a plane.
I wish that was me.
But we just didn't talk about it because what were we going to do? I'm going to sit here and fight with him about 9/11 the whole way
on a plane, talking about planes.
Yeah, that would be a bad move.
All anybody hears is blah, blah, blah.
I'm sure he didn't know who I was, but I recognized him. I don't remember which one of them it was. But
No. I mean, look, I know Jason really well. I fucking went to Ghislaine Maxwell's house with Jason Burmis, guys, last summer when that bitch got arrested here in New Hampshire.
Just tell him to admit a plane hit the Pentagon. That would undo a lot of damage.
All right,
it's very important to have a plane hit the Pentagon. If you don't have a plane hitting the Pentagon, you don't have the hijackers that were on that plane,
right?
And then you cannot trace them back to meeting Kelly.
And that was really based, Scott, when you were on Tim Pool, and Tim Pool's like, "Why should I care about this?" And you're like, Muhammad Atta crashed fucking Flight 11 into the North Tower because of what was happening in Israel and Gaza. That was fucking base, dude. I was screaming when you did that. That was great.
As far as kind of the red herring aspect there that you bring up, Rye, where if Donald Rumsfeld shot a missile at his own Pentagon while he was sitting in it, then I guess it's not a scandal that the CIA followed the hijackers from the Malaysia meeting to Bangkok to LAX and then set them free in America for a year and a half before they suicide crashed that plane into the damn building, right? Well, I got one too. Building 7. Big, fake, stupid red herring when there was not a single demolition charge in that building. And I know
every single fireman was not surprised that it was coming down.
No, they knew it was coming down. And listen, well, two things about this. First of all, you can find at my website from a long time ago, the final word on Building 7 or the last word on Building 7. And it's about, I don't know, 8 or 10 different quotes from the firefighters saying they knew Building 7 was coming down. And they're debriefed that night and the next day saying, yeah, me and Jimmy were in the bank building and Building 7 was making a loud noise and we could see it moving, creaking and bending and whatever. And that was when I called the chief and said, you better pull everybody back. And
the
that
southwest corner was missing.
Yeah, and the fake quote of Larry Silverstein saying, and that was when we decided to pull it. He's talking about his conversation with the fire chief, not the CIA demolition bomb expert. His conversation with the fire chief to pull the brigade back. Let's not even bother trying to fight the fire already because we're too busy digging in the rubble across the street, and the building is a total loss anyway. And it had been hit by the North Tower and burned all goddamn day. And there's no affirmative reason whatsoever to believe that there was a bomb in there unless just that's your religion. Okay, that's it. But here is a real Building 7 scandal. Okay.
Yeah, but Scott, they've just based on eyeballing it.
Oh yeah, no free fall. Even though it's still standing while stuff.
There is a scandal with the fire prevention systems being dismantled beforehand. Yeah. People got arrested and sat in jail for 10 years for that.
All right, but so here's the real Building 7 scandal, and it is a real one. Although, yeah. So anyway, it's that Rudy Giuliani insisted on putting the emergency command center at Building 7. And the cops and the firefighters begged him not to, because guess what? This is the most obvious terrorist target in the United States of America. It's already been hit once. They vowed to come back and hit it again. And so they begged him to put it at Queens. And instead, Giuliani wanted to be able to walk from the mayor's office to the emergency command center. And so Building 7 was close enough. And so he insisted on putting it there. But then, and this didn't come out, this footage didn't come out. And this goes to the bombs that were not in the towers either. the police footage of the cops in the helicopter up at the height of the tower's level. And they're saying this building is making loud noises and is creaking and moving and it's going to come down. Get everybody the hell out of there. And the cops got the message and the cops got out of the building. I think only a small handful of cops died when the towers collapsed. The firefighters didn't get the message. And the reason they didn't get the message was because Rudy Giuliani was absent from the emergency command center, which was closed for business that day since the complex was under a terrorist attack at the moment. And so there was no one there to, they got Motorola here and some other brand of radio there.
Yeah,
or they're
radio.
on different channels that can't
That's
talk
a big
to each
scandal,
other.
Scott. That is a big scandal.
It's
the
huge.
radios.
And listen, so the firefighters, not only were the firefighters not escaping with their lives, the firefighters were still going up the stairs with their hoses, obstructing all the people who were trying to get down. When the firefighters should have been picking up a lady over each shoulder and running down those damn stairs and getting everybody the hell out of there. There's no way.
Giuliani did all this grandstanding about the firemen that lost their lives, and not mentioning how part of that is his responsibility.
That's right. And meanwhile, so then Rudy's out in the street running for president. Look at me. I'm the mayor of America, out here in the street acting all tough and proud when he was absolutely negligent, absent without leave from his post that day, and responsible for the deaths, not just of those firefighters, but all the civilians that they could have saved and or also were obstructing on their way down those stairwells for, I don't know exactly how long it was, but it was long enough for all the cops to get the hell out of there.
Yeah. You know what Trump said about Rudy? Trump said, Giuliani's one of the best mayors we've ever had. He's a smart guy. Stop and frisk was so successful that I made it the policy backstage at my beauty pageants. Okay? I did, Scott. It's so true.
Carrick, yeah.
So true.
Scott,
Bernie Carrick.
I've got a question, Scott. I know like you hate the kooky 9/11 conspiracies just like everyone in this chat does, but
I hate them the most because I have to deal with them every day.
So we know what Ryan thinks. We've had him on many times, talk about it, but I want to know
this kind of stuff, with anthrax and all, but it's like here, that's something people get lost in the physics and shit. I'm sorry, I get triggered on this stuff, but it's like, okay, they 100% lied about Iraq having something to do with anthrax, right? With the meeting in Prague and right? 100%. James Woolsey, Fred Barnes, Gary Schmidt, Weekly Standard, as they lie about everything else about Iraq. They erroneously got a 9/11 in Iraq attached, which is like bombing Mexico after Pearl Harbor level stupid. And even after the fact, they can't say it. And I know people my age that signed up to join the military because they thought Saddam Hussein had something to do with September 11th. And Iraq had nothing to do with September 11th. Forget about inside job and all that. Like, visit that after. That's a clear deception about 9/11. And you can't get to that because of the missile tards and bombing every window people, just won't shut up. And so it's what QAnon did to voter fraud. It's like, well, you ruined that. Like we can't talk about that in an adult way because you made a tar baby out of it.
So Scott, what I wanted to ask is, to what level do you think Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the CIA could have been involved with 9/11?
Yeah, so that's what I was just going to say, was like, this gets to what you're talking about, is if all the missile hit the Pentagon and bombs in Building 7 stuff is a bunch of stupid red herrings, which it always has been, then what are the important questions, right? In other words, if there was no, already predisposed conspiracy theory movement in America ready to cash in on that tragedy, and you just had real journalists with courage who were willing to look at it, what's the question? Well, the question is, what did Prince Bandar and Prince Turki know, and when did they know it? And you're going to waterboard somebody, let's waterboard them and their closest friends in the vice president's office and see who we can get to start pointing fingers at each other. Because you do have a severe dereliction of duty, which, by the way, though, goes back, of course, deep into the Clinton years, where these Al-Qaeda guys had been in the country since, I think, the first real ass Al-Qaeda guys got here in early 2000. And, like a year and a half before the attack. And so, and frankly, I mean, I really do think, not to excuse anybody, because I'm really not excusing anybody. I mean, this to me is criminally negligent homicide, but I think you really do have a situation where the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA too would not work together at all. And the CIA wanted to go to war with these guys, kill them and or kidnap them and send them home to be, tortured and imprisoned, where the FBI wanted to indict them and lock up all their intelligence behind a grand jury where the CIA and nobody else could get to it either. And then you had the NSA, which just wouldn't share anything with anything. If you read James Bamford's great book, The Shadow Factory, he talks about how the CIA and the FBI were dying to get intercepts from the NSA that just absolutely would not share them, and including the switchboard house in Yemen, where Hani Hanjour, who, if you believe a missile hit the Pentagon, doesn't exist and doesn't matter, but if you don't, then he's one of the guys that the CIA followed to the United States, who crashed 77 into the Pentagon. His father-in-law ran what they call the switchboard house, where they took all the calls between Afghanistan and Europe and the United States and Pakistan, I guess, to coordinate the attack. And the CIA knew this, were demanding all the intercepts from the NSA, and the NSA just wouldn't give them. And so the CIA, which you got to love this about their unlimited budget, basically, the CIA created their own listening station on Madagascar, the massive island off of the southeastern coast of Africa, in order to try to target the Yemen switchboard house themselves, which they succeeded in doing, but they could only get half the conversation. They could hear the guys in Yemen, but they couldn't hear what was going on the Afghanistan or European side of the line there. And so they are just severely hampered that way. And if you watch this clip, it's should be a famous clip. And I forget now, I must have blogged this somewhere for safekeeping, but I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. It's Michael Scheuer, the former chief of the CIA's Bin Laden unit, testifying before Congress. And they ask him about the FBI and about John O'Neill. And John O'Neill had been the head of the New York office counterterrorism division there. And Michael Scheuer, you can say a lot of things about the guy, but no one ever calls him dishonest, I don't think. He's about as straight as a shooter as you could ever deal with. And he tells the congressman, he says, when that building came down on John O'Neill's head, that was the only good thing that happened to America that day. Thank God for that. And he's just seething with rage against this man who's been dead for years at this point. And you could tell Scheuer wants to go and dig up his corpse and kill him again. And says the whole thing was his fault. And so it's good that he died in the damn thing. He deserved to. And Scheuer may be right about that to a degree, right? That the essentially these guys are all a bunch of meathead, like your junior high school gym coach, idiot, know nothing, know it all, deputy sheriff who got a promotion. And so you put a bunch of deputy sheriff types in charge of America's national security, and this is the best that they can do. I think.
Look how bad they botched 93. They have a box of documents written in Arabic, not even in code or whatever, with all they would have needed to know, and no one bothered to read them and translate them.
I mean, that's a huge part of it. I mean, this national defense is a government program. For everyone who was, clenching their fists that morning, say, where are the fighter jets? Where are the fighter jets? And the answer was the fighter jets were in Saudi Arabia, bombing Iraq, motivating the attack. They're patrolling the DMZ in Korea. They're everywhere. They're in Europe, defending Germany from a Russian invasion that ain't coming. But they're not ready to defend the east coast of the United States.
Scott, how deeply involved
missile defense shield to protect Poland from Iran.
Yeah, exactly right.
Scott, how deeply involved in the 9/11 operation was the Pakistani ISI in the funding?
I kind of think that was a red herring. So there was one story, I guess Ry probably knows more about this than me, but it's General Mahmoud, who had
ISI General Mahmoud Ahmed.
Yeah, right, exactly. Who, apparently was at least accused of being tied to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and of sending money for the attack
through Syed Sheikh.
And then, yeah, exactly right. So, I think in the 28 or 29 pages, there's really a lot there once they finally declassified that. And
by the way,
my wife, I think, did.
I had all that information out a year and a half before they released it. I put that all in Empire.
I mean, Ryan, that's proven, Ryan, that a large chunk of the operational budget came from the ISI.
Well, you have to kind of understand what Al Qaeda is and how it got started. There's some portion of it, like the way they use them in Syria right now, right? They're on a look away list. And so they got all these money conduits. They used to use BCCI and they used Riggs Bank. They used intermediaries, even if it's individuals like Omar Bayoumi and Hassan Basnan, I think Scott was saying earlier. I don't know if we said the names, but they're moving around such enormous sums for our guys. You know, some people are informants and things like that too, and so it's hard to prove like, well, you're just not allowed to know, is what they can always say, and this is classified and that's that, right? But we're the ones that created Al Qaeda in the first place in Afghanistan. That was our program, and we're still using Al Qaeda fighters, and we were arming al-Sham all the way up until they did a stunt so bad in Syria, machine gunning women up against the walls and stuff that even Hillary couldn't put up with that. But then they started through Purple Shovel and others out aiding Al Qaeda again with small arms from the black market out of Bulgaria and stuff. And we've got the serial numbers and everything, and these things have been reported on. We're constantly arming and financing Al Qaeda. It never stopped. But it's just like the Contras in Iran-Contra. Publicly, we're against the Contras. We wouldn't do that. And privately, we were the glove in the hand the whole time. Well, the hand in the glove, excuse me.
let me ask you this, right? So, and the anthrax thing, I guess we'd have to do a whole treatment on that, and I'm willing to listen to you, but I think we still aren't exactly eye to eye on that. But as far as the attack, the September 11th attack, I wonder how you compare, in terms of the analogy to the attack in 1993, where this is the Washington Post version, that they admit would be the way that I would phrase it, that the CIA intervened with the State Department to allow these Egyptian Islamic Jihad terrorists into the country because these are all friends of ours from Afghanistan. And the blind Sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman, we like him and his guys. They're fine. And then, of course, you have a walk-in informant who tried to get the FBI to help him to make an inert bomb and foil the plot. But the FBI supervisor just completely screwed that up and wouldn't let his agents do their job. And so Ramzi Youssef came in and built the bomb, and the attack happened anyway. So, to sum up, the CIA was greatly involved in letting these terrorists into the country. I mean, directly involved in letting them into the country. Then the FBI failed to stop the attack. And yet, from my point of view, at least, and obviously you can read this as cynically as you want, but that doesn't mean that this was all a plot by them to make sure that the attack happened, which is the way I thought in the 90s when I was younger, but obviously the Occam's razor thing here is that these guys really suck at protecting us, which they apparently don't care too much to do. And so then I wonder,
they're incompetent at minimum.
Yeah, well, so
like the result's going to be the same. But their excuse for 93 was, we want you to incriminate the blind sheikh. We want you to go. It's like flipping somebody in the mob, and he's ready to tell on his underboss, and they're like, no, we need the boss. So they keep ignoring, and then he can't get the boss, and then the underboss ends up doing an attack or whatever. That's sort of like what happened in 93. That's the incompetent excuse.
All right, so if that's the baseline, then where does 9/11 differ from that narrative? Because again, you have the CIA, letting them come into the country. The guys you mentioned, Bayoumi, they're living with an FBI informant in San Diego. They're training at flight schools. You have FBI agents in various places around the country who are extremely concerned.
You got a pilot with 2 first cousins in Israeli intelligence. That's just a weird coincidence, but man, that's odd. And it's not like this thing. It's like all these things when you add them all together. Yeah, it just starts to be like, you think I can incompetence for this, maybe incompetence for that, but it gets to a point when the hijackers are changing their telecommunications ahead of local authorities that are trying to chase them. There's so many, like 1,000 cuts. And then you look clearly at, we definitely have financed Al Qaeda before and after 9/11. And so I think it's reasonable to wonder or to question it. And then I've got enough evidence to convince myself, at least, of that. I think incompetence is the kind of the plausible deniability, and some of it, because there's no way you could get the whole CIA and this whole NSA and everyone's in on it. That's practically impossible. You can get the media to lie about it, but you're gonna have whistleblowers if somebody's in the know. But we do covert operations all the time. Every covert operation we've ever done is by definition a conspiracy theory. And it's just, the Israelis celebrating the attacks and people being in the building, illegally doing work on the fire prevention systems. And they also fake their letters of credential for fire suppression to create the Denko mechanical and all that. And Catherine Smith getting killed the day before she goes on trial. There's so many things that I wish somebody with money and subpoena power could get in and look at. But you can't. All the stuff I have, the information I have, I don't know who to go to with it, because it's like, if you start talking about 9/11, you're automatically going to spend the next 3 hours saying, no, I'm not one of these things from Alex Jones or Loose Change and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
but this is just us here. So here's the thing. I saw, you may have seen this. It was on Twitter a few years ago. I think it's not as easy to find as it was, but it's Alex Gibney, the famous documentarian, the guy that did Taxi to the Dark Side and all of that, right? And he's interviewing Lawrence Wright, the New Yorker journalist who wrote the book The Looming Tower about the attack. And he's talking with Doug Miller and Ali Soufan. And Doug Miller, and I think one more actually. It was Doug Miller's partner inside Alex Station, who they were denied permission, at least they claimed they were denied permission by the CIA to share with the rest of the FBI the fact that the CIA had followed Hazmi and Midhar into the country. Or Hamzi. Is it Hamzi or Hazmi? I always fuck that.
Al Hazmi and Al Midhar. And then
Midhar,
later Hanjor too. Because you're talking about when they were at the Kurdish Mosque in San Diego. They knew Hanjor from Louisiana too, but
okay. But what it
doesn't
is
matter. There's 3 hijackers they know
Miller,
about until August. They did share the information in August, but by then they weren't in San Diego anymore. They're in the East Coast.
Right. But so then whatever they shared in August, it didn't get to Ali Soufan, because Ali Soufan tells a story that he was in Yemen investigating the Cole attack, which at that time it wasn't the war on terrorism. It was the Justice Department's criminal investigations of terrorism. So the FBI was in the lead. And Ali Soufan says as soon as September 11th happens, he gets a phone call and they say, come on down to the embassy, meaning CIA headquarters in Yemen. Come on down here. They take him in the back and they give him a manila envelope, and he opens up the manila envelope and it's the Malaysia meeting. And it has all the guys from the Malaysia meeting, half of whom did the Cole attack, half of whom did the September 11th attack. And Ali Soufan says he takes one look at this and goes, oh, fuck me. Look at, and knows immediately this is what happened. These are the guys who did the attack here in Yemen. These are the guys who went on to do what happened in America today. And he's just, deciding himself, but what can he do?
Some of them were in prison and there was a jail. They let them all out, a break in.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say that again.
A lot of the suspects for the Cole bombing and terrorists that were in jail in Yemen were all released.
By Salah or by who? By the Americans?
Well, I would argue the Americans got them released, but and I wanted to ask you about this too, about Amr al-Awlaki. Do you think that recent, what was it, 3 months ago?
Yeah, I think that was fake news, dude.
Leaked audio.
So?
Yeah, so the way I understand the story was a Houthi spokesman claimed that they were talking about al-Awlaki, but there's no other indication in the conversation that that's who they're talking about at all. So you're simply just taking the word of this Houthi spokesman saying that that's who the conversation's regarding. And so then you have Panetta saying, he's my guy, release my guy. But if you don't accept the assertion in the first place, they could be talking about anybody.
Scott,
it's still our guy, somebody is getting let out.
Scott, have you ever heard the story about George Tenet flailing around in a pool screaming how the Saudis and the Israelis played him when he was drunk?
No.
About 9/11?
Yeah, he's like...
It's in a book. I'd have to look up where it is, but Tenet was drunk on, I don't know, whatever, whiskey, whatever it is, and he was screaming how the Saudis and the Israelis played him and fucked him on 9/11.
Yeah. So, as far as the high fivers and the art students and all that, that's something that I've covered on my show in depth in the past. You'd have to go back quite a few years now, but I interviewed Christopher Ketchum and Phil Giraldi and quite a few others about this. In fact, I'll ask you about Phil Giraldi here on the Saudi role in running the hijackers. When the 28 pages came out, my wife, Larissa Alexandrovna Horton, wrote a thing for antiwar.com, which you say had every single thing in there already. She had almost all of it. And so the way that she wrote up her story was, here's what we already knew, and here's what we're finding out in the finally declassified pages and how it fits in context. And to her, it's extremely incriminating, although still circumstantial. But you do have where literally Prince Bandar's wife sends the check to
Haifa,
Bayumi for these guys, room and board and whatever. So, but then Giraldi, who I know to actually be, more of a truther than me and extremely skeptical and willing to question authority on this issue for sure. He wrote a thing for the American Conservatives saying, man, I've read the 28 pages now and I'm not impressed at all. The reality is the Saudis pay the way of Saudi nationals in the country all the time for no reason, for any reason. You're going to flight school, here's some money. You don't have to, unless you already believe in, the pre-existing control behind their purpose here, or that the Saudis already were involved or knew them at that point. You don't have to really read much more into it than that. Oh, and in fact, one more thing I'll ask you, right, is that
they just send them money. They bought them a house. I mean, it was, and live with them. That's a little bit different. And you give internationals money, but not people on Interpol's most wanted list or anything, not people that are on no-fly lists. That shouldn't happen. Yeah.
Well, and so both of them were?
Al-Hazmi, Al-Mudhar and Al-Hazmi had already been, they'd already been our terrorists. We use Al-Qaeda in Bosnia and Afghanistan and other places. I think one of them was in the Cold Bomb. Let me see. I've forgotten so much about 9/11 because I got sick of it around 2015 or whatever. I put my films out and stuff. I'm like, I'm done. Like, it's like the kook people. You can't get, it's like same with Kennedy. They obsessed with the magic bullet and it's like, fuck it.
Yeah,
you can't deal with it. But
so I haven't read the book yet, but it's Ray Noleski, who is the guy who was behind the movie Press for Truth. And he's the guy who's on video, the Rich Blee podcast. And there was part 2. I never could find part 2 again.
I think they used clips of my film in their film.
Possibly. But they interview Richard Clarke. And essentially what they decide is that Tenet was keeping all this from Clarke at the White House, that he was tailing these guys, and that I guess, I don't know if it's Occam's razor, they have other reasons to believe so, but their explanation was that the women at Alex Station were trying to run their own op, even though they were just analysts and not operatives really, and don't know anything about real spy work, but they were trying to flip these guys. And trying to, wouldn't that be a great score if we could have a set of double agents inside Al Qaeda? And so then that would be why the Saudi intelligence in America were grooming them and protecting them, etc. That was a project they were working on that apparently at some point they just dropped or, lost track of the guys and then didn't want to admit that they let them in and lost track of them, something like that. I don't know.
Cofer Black has stayed pretty quiet about that, right, Ryan?
Yeah, and Richard Blee.
That's
responsible for, in my opinion, allowing them to escape Tora Bora. Like, you can also say, oh, man, that's just another fuck up and more incompetence. But I'm like, damn, man, at what point? Like, are we that bad? Because they could have got them all.
Boy, I sure think Tora Bora was deliberate in letting them escape there. I mean, you get no argument for me there. Although I don't know who else.
I can't prove that. I can't prove it.
I mean, I think that decision really came from Bush and Rumsfeld and Franks at the very top. That we'll give you some air power, but we will not give you Rangers and Green Berets and Marines.
The things you need to catch people on the ground.
Yeah. And honestly, so if you read Gary Berntson's book Jawbreaker or what's the guy's name? Thomas Greer is aka Dalton Fury. Is the Delta Force lieutenant colonel in charge there, wrote the book Kill Bin Laden. And both of them say, we just couldn't understand it. We were so frustrated and we tried to understand and it was so puzzling. And they just say that over and over again. It's a very nice way of saying that, this was all clearly deliberate.
Scott, are you gonna debate Bill Kristol? What's going on with that, man? Tell me about that.
I am. October the 4th.
Dude, how did that happen? That's going to be fucking epic, dude.
I hope the fucking Rona's gone so I can fly down there.
Oh, Scott, you were gonna fucking own that neocon trash, dude. And the world needs that. Whatever I need to do to help promote it, put money into it, whatever I got to do, Scott. This is a prize fight, dude. You're gonna own that motherfucker.
I'm gonna be doing Vaseline Snow Angels when this happens.
Tell us about it, Scott.
He's like the second worst one.
Yeah, I better do good. I mean, I know once Gene announced that it was back on, this was supposed to happen last May, but it got all canceled for the germ. And then once Gene announced that it was back on, everybody on Twitter was like, listen, you better kill this guy or don't come home.
Dude.
So the pressure's on. I better not do a bad job. But honestly, I'm right about everything, so it shouldn't really be that difficult.
Co-founder of PNAC.
I was hyping you, Scott, on Twitter. I'm like, if I was Will Crystal, I'd be fucking scared if I had to face down Scott Horton.
You know, I don't think he's worried about it, man. I think he's a very,
he's a reptile.
If nothing else, a very confident guy.
Yeah, he's a reptile. You know, he doesn't give a fuck about human life. But
He'll just call you anti-Semitic blood libel.
Or even if not, he'll just say, well, we fundamentally disagree about the overall beneficence of this
killing children
outreach and just, you know, whitewash it all.
Where's this going down, Scott? New York City?
Yeah, it's in New York on October the 4th. And it's all at sohoforum.com, I think is the address there. Just search up Gene Epstein in the Soho Forum. It'll come right up there.
You know how plebes and normies hype like boxing matches and wrestling and MMA, dude? I want to fucking hype the shit out of this thing, dude. I want people to know this is
Crystal in it though, because so many people talk shit directly to him. Oh, Scott Horton's gonna fuck you up and all this stuff.
Fuck him. I will talk shit to him, Horton. He's a mass murdering psychopath.
We don't want him to back out. Look, we don't want him to say, obviously, I'm going into a place.
I'd build him up.
I'm going to talk shit like Mike Tyson. Scott Horton's going to show up. He's going to fucking tear your head off. He's going to fucking eat your children. He's going to tell you some things about the neocon agenda. You better be afraid, Crystal. Scott Horton's coming, motherfucker.
No, you know what? Honestly, when they announced it the first time, which is I guess like in the fall of 2019, people were saying really, really hard stuff that I was really surprised that he didn't back out then. So
here you go, Ryan. What do you think? Next up, Ryan Dawson versus Ben Shapiro.
Oh, that's
I love it. I wish I could participate on the Twitter stuff.
And he wouldn't do it.
Shapiro only debates retarded 8th graders. So
yeah, well, he debates people who think there are 82 genders with blue hair, and if you don't fit those qualifiers, then you're not debate worthy.
He talked to adults twice, Andrew Neil and Carlson, and he got owned both times. He's a trained lawyer arguing with 15-year-olds, about identity politics. And I'm like, okay, let's smash some low-hanging fruit. I'm glad to do that. But the thing about Shapiro that's funny is like you're arguing against identitarians, and you're an identitarian. Like you're Israel right or wrong just because you're Jewish. That's his whole world. It's like, I know you're not dumb enough to think that bulldozing down someone's house or shooting kids in the balls is okay, right? The only way that you can accept that is like tribalism. There is no way like anyone smart enough to tie their shoes can think that that's a morally okay thing to do. So that's why I go back to this thing. It's a psychological problem. It's not an intellectual problem. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes they also happen to be stupid.
Hey, Reed.
Something deep.
Hey, Reed, try to turn your, see if you can move 90 degrees or something, because the wind is in your micro bad right now.
Oh, okay, hold on. I'll just
see if you can shift around that table or you're at it.
It's dust in the wind right now. It's dust in the wind.
Probably out there with a fan.
I'm looking forward to that, Scott. Either way, I think you're going to absolutely own him, and the dude has no legs to stand on, and it's going to be pretty epic. It's going to be epic.
Yeah, well, I wrote a thing like a year and a half ago when all this started. That was going to be my opening statement. I had this whole plan. In fact, I hope I'm not giving away too much, Bill, if you're watching, but I originally was going to have a lot of fun blaming Bill Kristol for Trump, his nemesis, and explaining why Trump was the natural reaction to everything that he had done and everyone listening to his advice. But then, so now that Trump is gone, there's a little bit of fun taken out of that argument, but I just need to find a little bit better way to approach it again. But
you guys got to admit, when Trump was in that debate, that primary debate in South Carolina versus Jeb, and he said the World Trade Center came down during your brother's reign, that's not safe. That you cheered a little bit, right? I cheered.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, Jeb was so inept. All Jeb could do, and by the way, so for people who don't remember, during the Bush years, they would say this all the time. And always unchallenged. He kept us safe.
That's not safe.
He was on the job for 8 months before the attack, and he didn't keep those people safe.
Right.
He
had the DC sniper terrorist attack too.
Yeah, but nobody. that's true. And but
They're all like,
he
we
never
haven't had any since. Yes, you have.
Nobody ever countered that argument. He kept us safe. He kept us safe. No matter what you say about him, maybe he shouldn't have done Iraq, but still, he kept us safe. He kept us safe. And then Donald Trump just goes, well, but what about September 11th? And then Jeb goes, yeah, remember the rubble? And Donald Trump goes, yeah, remember the rubble? What do you mean he kept us safe? He had the job for 8 months. Have you ever heard of somebody who had a job for 8 months?
$6 trillion over there.
He's like, we spent trillions of dollars. They said there were weapons. They lied. They knew there were no weapons, and they don't have it. You can call it however you want to call it. They don't have it. And when Trump did that, I was a big fan of that. But then he goes around, gets elected, and sells billions to the Saudis to genocide Yemen. So,
yeah, Scott.
He did say good stuff about the Bush legacy. He got the right wing of America to break from the Bush legacy, and not necessarily the Republican Party, but certainly right wing voters of America. That I don't have to believe in that shit anymore. Ron Paul said they didn't, but they didn't quite believe him. But when Donald Trump says you don't have to believe in it anymore, then I guess that's good enough. And by the way, when he said that, the great impression you did there, that was the debate in South Carolina.
Yeah,
and the next day. This is, that's the third vote, the third state to vote in the system. And so all the other candidates were still in the race. So the next day, he got 2/3 of the vote.
Oh.
And the other 17 candidates split the other 1/3 of the vote. And that was bringing out W. Bush to run, not even understanding that this is the kiss of death, but thinking that the boys in South Carolina are going to rally around W. Bush still.
The World Trade Center came down during your brother's reign, not Dave.
Yeah, so Scott, the thing with Trump is, he's like the most Zionist and the most pro-Saudi Arabia president we've ever had. So, like, even though we got away from Bush, like the weapons of mass destruction thing, so many people don't realize the influence that Saudi Arabia and Israel have over our foreign policy, and that nothing changes until that goes away.
Bush Senior is pretty pro-Saudi Arabia. And LBJ has been the most Zionist, but yeah.
Dawson, is that true that Poppy Bush, Mr. fucking CIA, was trying to cuck Israel in the 90s in his one term?
No, I mean, he didn't want to so-called finish the job in Iraq, and the head of the DOD, which was Dick Cheney at the time, admitted as much to Bush. There's an interview in I think '94 where he's saying because it would have been a quagmire. And because it would have threatened the territorial integrity of Turkey, you would have seen Sunnis here and Kurds here. And he explained exactly what actually happened. So that's like, again, when they're saying it's incompetence, I'm like, yeah, but Cheney's on tape explaining that he knows exactly what will happen if they do this, and still did it. So there are some people in there, the Cheneys, the Pearls and stuff, that are evil. They're not dumb. They're evil, but they know better, and they still did it.
The thing is on that, though, is, Wormser and Pearl wrote up the clean break 2 years after Cheney said that. And the argument was that, look, that makes a lot of sense, Mr. Cheney, but we talked with Ahmed Chalabi and we gamed this out. And what's going to happen is Jordan is going to dominate Iraq, and it's going to work out great for us.
Yeah,
and so
they'll say whatever they got to because it's in Israel's interest. They don't care about the United States or Iraq.
Yeah, but I think Cheney probably bought that. And of course, he had more important fish to fry. He had his own problems with running Halliburton into the ground, and he owed those guys a lot of money and had to put them on the dole doing something.
Well, his wife was the president of division at Lockheed Martin too. That was another plus, and then Kellogg Brown and Root, so they're profiteering.
But so I write about this in the book that Cheney and his right hand man, I forget the guy's name, but Cheney had this right hand man who was the FOO of Halliburton and the chief operations officer, and they decided. Chief financial officer, I guess. I forgot which anyway. And they decided, the two of them, to buy Dresser Industries, which was this, massive manufacturing firm. But they were right on the eve of being found liable for literally billions of dollars in asbestos cancer claims. And as soon as they bought the company, the verdict started rolling in. And it was just a huge albatross that Dick Cheney had brought on for the, stockholders and chieftains of Halliburton. And those guys are gangsters, man. They brought Dick Cheney on, not because he was a businessman, but because he was a politician He had been a member of the House of Representatives and the Secretary of Defense. And the idea was this guy's political connections are going to make us a bunch of money. So then what does he do? He tries to participate in the free market, and he hooks a giant billion-dollar albatross around their neck. So he owed them big. And if all the Iraqis had to die to keep him, to protect his skin, he was going to kill them all. It was what was, going on there as far as that goes.
So, Scott, this is Governor Jesse Ventura. People are wondering what you and Ryan's take are in the recent summit between Putin, my boss at RT, and President Biden. What do you guys think? How did it go?
It's
Man, those are really good.
I like his Jesse the most.
Yeah, no.
Well, the thing is, Putin showed up there and said the Crimea is not much bigger than the Baja where I live. I live in the Baja. It's mine. I own it. I'm taking it. Fuck you. Fuck the EU. Fuck the EU. It's mine. Thoughts, boys.
We got to crank call some people, dude.
Yeah, for real. Well, I think Biden climbed down on a few things. He climbed down, I guess, before they even got there. He backed off on the sanctions against the Germans on the Nord Stream project. And, he had blinked on sending destroyers into the Black Sea. Then he went ahead and sent some again. But he, famously, I think the most important part of what happened was, I guess, right in the lead up to the summit was when the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, tweeted that the Americans assured me that we're on the path to NATO membership. And then that earned him a rebuke from the Secretary of State, Blinken, and President Biden both said that's not true. And that, the reason why is because there's so many things that Ukraine would have to do to qualify, and they're not qualified. And they're kicking that can way down the road there. And they know that that's absolutely non-negotiable for the Russians there. So, and they, they saved, I guess before the deal, they saved New START, but they went ahead and both of them are throwing the Open Skies Treaty out now. And they're making no effort to save the INF Treaty. I guess the most positive development out of the whole thing probably is that the media did not attack Biden as a traitor for climbing down on any of this stuff. And they're treating him like a reasonable statesman for coming to terms with this leader. So I'm for that overall take. Is the most important thing is that the narrative is, through no fault of Trump's own, the narrative of his treason with Russia just absolutely, handcuffed his Russia policy in such a horrible way. And frankly, the fact that Biden is a one-term lame duck and he knows it means that he can do what he wants for good or for ill. And I am worried that he has such an interest in Ukraine, and always a bad one. But at least that means that he knows the first thing about it, which is more than you could say for a lot of these people who would get us into a war over it. And so, and one more thing I guess I'll say is that Ray McGovern, the former CIA analyst who I interview all the time, he was the former chief of the Soviet division. And he really makes a lot of the fact that this guy, William Burns, is now the head of the CIA. And I don't know a lot about Burns. I really should read up on him. In fact, when I first heard that, I was like, what? Nicholas Burns? Oh, no, that's a different guy. That's George Bush's man in Iraq. This is William Burns, and he's the guy in the WikiLeaks, thanks to Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, who's rotting in solitary confinement to death right now in Great Britain for leaking this. But it's when he was an ambassador in the Foreign Service doing something or another, he went and met with Sergei Lavrov, and Lavrov read him the riot act on Ukraine and NATO. And the title of the State Department cable is "Niet means Niet." And essentially, to boil it down, I met with Sergei Lavrov today, and he said, hey, all this talk about bringing Ukraine into NATO, you're not doing that. Read me loud and clear. Thanks very much for your time, pal. And then Burns wrote that home to the bosses, and, very frankly. And I guess Ray knows other things about the guy in his career that gives him reason to believe that this is a guy who understands the situation well enough that he's not going to just go along with whatever Victoria Nuland wants to do over there for ideological reasons. That's Robert Kagan's wife. Course. Yeah. Yep. And in large measure responsible for the coup in Ukraine in 2014 that started the war in the East and the loss of Crimea and all that. So, You know, it's a heck of a note to have to root for the Democrats, but they are. I mean, Mike Pompeo is worse than Antony Blinken in almost every way. And that's not to say much about Antony Blinken, but at least we're joking about this the other day on the show. At least he's a wimp and he knows it, right? Where Pompeo is this big tough guy who's got to act like a tough guy all the time. And, you know, the wimp factor can backfire because a lot of times the wimps have to act real tough. But Blinken doesn't seem to act tough. Blinken seems to back down all the time. And I like that about him.
The less government does, the better. Usually.
Yeah, I mean, good for him for being afraid. He should be afraid. What the hell do they think they're doing? Messing around. Imagine if the Russians try to overthrow the government in Ottawa and use a bunch of Nazis to do it, and then declare war against the people in British Columbia for refusing to go along with it. We'd go to nuclear war with Russia over that. America, Jimmy Carter would, you know, Ralph Nader would launch a war against Russia if they tried that shit in Canada. And we think we can do that in Ukraine? Why? How in the world could anyone in DC think that that's tolerable at all? And if you listen to them, it's all a bunch of incoherent bullshit. It's all a bunch of lofty principles that they don't have to define, essentially glittering generalities, right? About, you know, global security and the international order and all these things. They don't have any specific accusations against Russia. The Russians are not going to invade the Baltics. They're not going to invade Ukraine. They only took Crimea because America was trying to take it from them. They were leasing it. They respected it as the property of the Ukrainians. They had a contract. And when the Americans tried to do a coup and kick them out the hard way, they reacted and seized the thing. And they didn't even kill anyone doing it. It was just a coup de main, where they just kind of went outside and seized the Crimean Peninsula, which was traditionally a Russian territory since the 1780s anyway. And so, you know, I don't think that in a conversation with anyone on the principals committee or even the deputies committee in the Trump government, that you could even have a reasonable discussion about any of this stuff. Whereas I like to imagine, as bad as Victoria Nuland is and some of these other people, that there must be times where Biden and Blinken and Sullivan can kind of whisper to each other and talk about true things and base their policies at least on reality, even if they're doing the wrong thing, that at least they're not just believing so much of their own bullshit that they're going to get us killed. Although then again, I don't know, man. They keep doing these giant NATO exercises and flexing all these muscles and flying bombers near Russian territory where they shouldn't be doing. So, you know, I really don't know, man. I was talking this with Doug Bondo, and he goes, look, nobody in DC wants a war with Russia.
Sorry.
You know, they know they can't have a war with Russia, but so that then raises the question, what the fuck are they doing then? You know?
We had Biden and Obama that tried to encourage Georgia and South Ossetia to break from Russia, like Putin wasn't going to do anything about that. And Saakashvili and them just go up north and they continue their own rhetoric. And then
no, that was Bush. That was still Bush in 2008.
The Bush, yeah, the South Ossetia is Bush, and then Biden and Obama come in. I think he was lame duck at that point, though, wasn't he? Or no? Whatever.
It was in August of 2008, and then, of course, they all framed it as though the Russians had started the war. In fact, there was a really funny bit. I don't know if you remember this, Ryan, that you know, McCain, especially in the debates,
were in Russia too at the time. So
I'm sorry,
it was in August because the Olympics were also in Russia, right? Same time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In 2008, I don't know. In 2014, yeah, there's Sochi Olympics in 2014. I don't know about in 2008, but I do know that McCain was pushing this thing, Russian aggression, really hard. And then there was a moment in one of the debates where Tom Brokaw is hosting it, and it's Obama and McCain is saying Russian aggression, Russia started the war, Russia invaded Georgia. And then he and Brokaw and Obama all exchange eye contact with each other, communicating that, remember earlier when we had this discussion about how we were all going to agree on the lie that Russia started the war here, and Obama, just like we talked about, you're not going to challenge him on the fact, are you? And then it's Obama's turn, and he goes, yes, Russian aggression in Georgia really is a big concern. But it was just so transparent. You could see the way they were kind of silently body languaging each other, referring back.
I often get Bush and Obama confused. I can't tell the difference between them. I often get Bush and Obama confused because it just sort of bleeds together.
I know. Well, I do confuse their names a lot too, because
they blamed Litvinenko on Russia. Remember that? Oh, let's poison someone with polonium. Do
Yeah.
not shoot them. Not 1,000 other ways you can get rid of somebody. Let's lose a radioactive poison. And the Skripal thing was just as stupid. But it doesn't matter. Like Rachel Maddow is going to be up there saying Russia, 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 and that's what they're going to go with.
Yep. Hey,
So,
speaking of
Scott,
which,
do you think we're pulling out of that? Oh,
This guy predicted the conflict in Ukraine. He said,
so wait,
he was like,
hold
next
that
year
thought.
it's going to be there.
Yeah, hold that thought, Reed, for a second, because as long as you're bringing up Litvinenko there, Ryan, why don't you tell people who you're pointing at there in the corner?
Oh, so this is
For the youngins.
This is the man, Justin Raimondo, from antiwar.com, chief editor, and I think you edited for him, right?
Oh shit, what's the date?
It's 2 days away, I think.
2 days away.
on the
So,
day
he
ahead.
died 2 years ago.
Yeah, he passed away
short
2
of
years ago, and I desperately would have loved to see what Justin would have written about COVID-19 and the election and and Jeffrey Epstein too. I think he probably would have gotten into that.
Yeah, all of this stuff. And especially older Justin, by which I mean younger Justin. Bush years and early Obama years, Justin was, really at his peak there. And man, he was good. He's probably the only guy really, I think, that you would agree with on the Litvinenko story and what really happened to that guy and how they framed it up to make it look like the KGB had killed him and all of that, right?
Well, the media did that. I mean, I kept digging on that real deep into this giant the debt that he had from this real estate scam in Spain with the mob and all that. It was like really fascinating stuff. And then I think UNS took it or whatever. I couldn't figure out where else to put the article because no one cared about Litvinenko anymore. By the time I had dug all the stuff up, that story was gone. Nobody knows who he is, whatever. But it was Boris Berezovsky had done that, like, Russian conspiracy, trying to frame me lie before when he had murdered a journalist in Russia. And actually, there's a book that Justin recommended, The Godfather of the Kremlin, which covers that portion of it. That was before the Litvinenko affair. And that was by the Russian translator of Forbes, who was shot. And then they got stuck on an elevator and died in the hospital. But he went after a lot of these oligarchs. And like these are the Russians that you need to worry about, are these oligarchs. And the whole history of the Cold War and Yeltsin and Gaydar and all that is just, like you said earlier, it's complicated. So, who said the racist word? That's what they're waiting for, right? Like, who said the bad thing? Because that stuff with the entire flip over from communism, they didn't use venture capitalists. It became an oligarchical system, and it's it's a mouthful to explain it all. But it was ridiculous for them to be blaming Putin for that too. But that was, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how stupid it is. Like the laptop thing. Just say Russia, and a good portion of people will buy it because they're so anti-Russia, anti-Putin. And it really started with the like Pussy Riot crap, where like he's kicking people out for being lewd inside of a church. And I'm thinking, so, I mean, you can't go to a church and do that. And I'm an atheist, but you can't go into a church and grab your vagina and stuff like they were doing. And like, of course they got in trouble, but there's been this anti-Putin screed because he went after the oligarchs. A lot of our oligarchs are, best friends with these people. And so the media has had a completely one-directional hate Russia, Russiagate, blame Russia for anything. And it works because no one's allowed to say otherwise. Right. And if you do, then you're just a Putin shill, which is too far the other direction, right? Like that guy's done plenty of bad things. You don't have to make things up. But it's all the made up ones that they're worried about.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Scott, this is how Reed and I know each other. We met on Tulsi Gabbard's campaign, and this is what we ran into here in New Hampshire. You're anti-war. You don't like all this money being spent on killing people 8,000 miles away who you'll never meet or know anything about. You're a Russian asset. You're a Russian agent. You're favorable to the Russians.
Did that to Tulsi.
Yeah. So you know what I say to fuck all them, fuck all those people. They're stupid. They're ignorant. They don't know anything they're talking about. And I'm glad it brought us together, Reed. This is why we're here. This is what we're doing. We're
And
pushing
you know,
back against the insanity.
The people in the comments are wondering if every time you go away, you're switching with Mike and you're just not telling us because we can't tell you guys apart. But
all right. Only right now for the next 15 minutes, go to Infowars.com. You can find the answers. 15% off right now on the Jackman hologram theory. Infowars.com.
Yeah, well, we got like 20 minutes left, but Scott, I wanted
76.
your opinion.
I've been switching with my brother too.
Yeah, I wanted your
In
opinion.
fact, I've been Scott the whole time. And my brother's name is Scott. Ryan's not even here.
Well, Ryan's pro-Palestine, Scott's pro-Israel. That's how it works.
No, he isn't.
I know.
So
He
Scott,
doesn't even think anything about that.
I was gonna say something, but I got what Biden's got, and I can't remember what the fuck it was anymore.
Infowars.com. ScottHorton.com, folks.
Scott, when do you
2
think
years
we'll
to
be
the
out
day,
of
though. I gotta praise
Afghanistan?
Justin again, man.
Say what? Afghanistan?
Yeah, when do you think we'll actually be out of Afghanistan? Do you think September 11th still, or what's your thought?
Man, I really don't know. They say they're trying to slow down the withdrawal for now, and they're pushing the Pentagon, according to the New York Times, they're pushing hard for permission to start hitting the Taliban when they take out Afghan government targets, which if they do that, then that means the withdrawal deal will be in real jeopardy where they've held their fire from our guys. We haven't had a combat death there in over a year now.
Now,
And
is that incompetence, or they just want to stay?
well, yes, I mean, the Pentagon wants to stay, but the reality is, I mean, the real incompetence is in Biden kicking the can down the road. They had a deal to get out on May 1st, signed by the Trump government. And this is just like what happened in Vietnam.
But
Well,
Putin's
look at
paying.
Iraq War II. In Iraq War II, they won the war for guys that hated them and kicked their asses out, but for guys who could hold the territory, right? That they won the war for the supermajority and their political leaders. So there was a lull in the violence at the time they were kicking us out. And the regime that Bush put in power there is still in power in Baghdad there because, they were essentially a repressed supermajority at the time who he helped them take it. But now in Afghanistan, it's much more like Vietnam, where we propped up a group of people in government who just have nothing like popular support to keep them in power there. And so in Vietnam, they called it the decent interval. Hey, North Vietnamese, don't just come marching right down into the South as soon as we withdraw, because that'll be embarrassing for us and we won't want to withdraw. So give us a decent interval so that the American people can change their mind to muscle cars or whatever other different thing. And, listening to Foreigner or whatever it is. And so, and take their mind off of what's happening in Vietnam. Well, so they had their chance for their decent interval. And that was between the inauguration of Joe Biden at the end of January and the beginning of May, like in the deal. And once they broke that deal and said, we're staying till September, the Taliban said, well, it's fighting season now. The snow's melting and the ammunition is, bored sitting there. We want to use it. And so they go back to war. And they've been, steadily kicking the Afghan National Army's ass for years now. And it's the start of the fighting season. All they did, they kicked the can down the road for 4 months. But what has that really bought them? I mean, is that bought, again, like right now, they don't have permission to strike the Taliban at all. In fact, according to the New York Times, the Washington Post, as of half a year ago, the Joint Special Operations Command, I'm almost certain it's Delta. I forget if it's Delta or SEALs, but they're flying drones for the Taliban against their rivals in the ISIS group there, which is really just local Pakistanis mostly. But anyway, from the other side of the line. But America's been allied with the Taliban, fighting against their common enemies in ISIS. And essentially if the policy is withdraw the military, then that means they're giving up on the government in Kabul. Biden has agreed with Trump's strategic decision that we're not going to stay to prop up this regime anymore. But then the problem is, if you check in the media, you see that the narrative is, yeah, but no fair, we lost. And it's going to look really bad. And so we can't have that. There's a long piece in Politico today, which is all full of quotes of Democrats attacking Biden from the right and saying this is going to look terrible. And not only that, the Republicans are going to exploit it and say that we lost Afghanistan, as though they don't have the rejoinder that Trump wanted us out too. And that was one of the reasons people supported Trump, was because he wanted out of Afghanistan. And by the way, a deal's a deal, and we lost the war anyway. There's no stopping the Taliban now unless you want to do a whole other surge back up to 70,000 troops and full-scale air war and go back to the year 2010 or 11 here. But nobody supports that. Not even in DC are they willing to do that. And so I mean, really, they closed down the Kandahar Air Base. They're out of Helmand. As far as I understand, they're out of Helmand. And they have begun destroying everything and pulling everything else out of the Bagram Air Base in preparation to try to hand it over to the Afghan army there. And they're just, at this point, they have a small contingent of essentially protection of diplomatic forces and spies in Kabul. And, I don't know whatever drone bases that they have scattered out here and there, but my understanding is all that is closing down. And then so when they say, and don't get me wrong, I don't mean to sound like, gullible here or whatever, but I mean, that's just the reality of they've been packing up C-130s with, and transport planes full of men and getting things out of there, equipment and soldiers out of there. But they are saying, they've said in the New York Times blatantly all along, because they're being attacked for daring to do this, right? So they're defending themselves by saying, well, listen, we might be forsaking the Kabul government, but we're still going to keep a counterterrorism force there. And we want to have a base in Kazakhstan or a base in Pakistan, or at least we'll fly air missions from ships in the Arabian Sea or the Indian Ocean there off the coast of Pakistan. And we'll be able to do counterterrorism strikes against any anti-American forces there. And then look, the core of the Taliban is the Pashtun society, and there are non-Pashtuns who are part of it. But there are a lot of Tajiks and Uzbeks and Hazaras who have a lot of motive to resist Taliban power. And even if the Afghan army dissolves, they can still devolve back down to their local militias, and they can fight as allies. And we could have a very bloody civil war ongoing between the remnants of the Kabul government and the rising Taliban regime. And it could be extremely ugly. I mean, right now you have the CIA's old favorite son, Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, he came in from the cold and made a peace deal. And he's very old now. But he came in and made a peace deal in 2016 and lives in Kabul with all of his men, the Hizbi Islami group. They could go right back to war with a snap of his fingers right now. And he was known as the Butcher of Kabul. The CIA supported him even after the Soviets left, while he was just shelling Kabul because he couldn't sack it. He couldn't take it. So he just killed something like 50,000 people, launching artillery shells at it all through the early 1990s. And so, Scott, in other words, it's a rat hole, man. And there are so many horrible sons of bitches with some power who are willing to fight like hell over power that I agree with the Warhawks that there's nothing but disaster coming. I mean, I guess it's possible. I don't know. I'll say one more thing. Sorry. The Taliban have been winning a lot of battles, but they've also just been walking right into a bunch of military bases and saying, hand over your guns, boys. And then they let them go. They're like, execute the commander and let everybody else go. And this has been happening. You read about it in all the major papers. It's been happening for the last week, especially. They've just been walking into district after district after district, including right on the outskirts of Kabul. And so, honestly, I don't want to overestimate the power of the Afghan government, such as it is at all. It could be that the Taliban don't even need to invade Kabul with, a convoy of pickup trucks in the ISIS fashion. They might just be able to walk right in, and just take the whole place over. And, like the Russians in Crimea, coup de main. Just look, you guys are out, we're here, and there's nothing you can do about it. So just forget it, right? Like when Lando's men surround the stormtroopers and they're like, oh, all right, you got us.
It's incredible.
So I don't know. I think that could happen.
Well, John
Kiriakou scenario probably
said to me, Scott. John Kiriakou told me, I had him on my show a couple months ago. He said if Bagram gets closed down, that's a sure sign that we're getting the fuck out of there.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's not over yet. And believe me, they could change all this, right now. As I mentioned that Politico story today, all the political pressure. John McCain's dead and gone, but the political pressure remains. Somebody asked me, I guess
the Toomer went on a suicide mission, right, Ryan?
See, I think that Toomer should get a Nobel Peace Prize for taking out a warmongering lunatic on a brave suicide mission.
Oh, that's so based.
They had a Russian excuse. So they had a Russia excuse about Afghanistan too. They said
Right.
Putin was paying for money for the heads of
Bounties.
Americans, as if I don't know, invading them isn't a reason to shoot at us anyway. But that was the thing, because they realized like we made this connection of Putin and Trump from the very beginning, so he's got to overcompensate to prove otherwise. Because they did not want them working together, especially on Syria. That was the real thing. Everything else is tangential to that, because they did not want him working with Russia in Syria. And he did do a couple cruise strike, shots at Syria, what have you. But Assad was able to take the whole southwestern part of the country back, minus Idlib in the north, and then Rojava's annexed, but not really. Like they have the oil and they just sell it to the Syrians anyway. He cleaned up Deir ez-Zor and Hama and all that. So, with us out of the way, Al Qaeda fell apart. And that did happen after the June meeting with Putin and Trump. He said he cut off CIA funding, and they quickly withered away. Now, Israel continues to do airstrikes against Damascus. They did like 4 in a row right before Gaza. They actually attacked Latakia first time. And one of the anti-air defense missiles landed in the Negev desert above Dimona. I mean, this stuff could escalate so fast, and it is really stupid. Like, what are we doing supporting Al Qaeda and Israel's interest in Syria? It's that clear, but they can wash that all away by saying, yeah, but Russia's on the other side and Russia's the bad guys. Russia. And Afghanistan, when Trump finally almost did something good, talking about getting out of Afghanistan, he doesn't want to look weak or whatever. And this is another one of these pussies that has to act tough by, well, I don't want someone to call me a wimp, so I'm going to be a wimp and kowtow to their demands, right?
Yep.
And so he knows that isn't true about Russia, probably, but he's like, the media's going to say that, and Trump is such a narcissist, that's his image or whatever. So he doesn't want people to say bad things about him. Oh, I wanted Eric to do his Trump impression. I guess he's gone already with it. He could have done that real well. But I'm so sick of the Russia stuff, and it is also this guilt by association crap that everybody seems to think is okay. Like, you just cannot have a nuanced position about anything anymore, or you'll be placed in this camp or that. And in the way social media is constructed, like, I'm not even allowed on Twitter at all, but you can't explain complicated things in just sentences or whatever, but you can shitpost easily. And so it's getting further and further that direction. I just think we're headed toward a technocratic dystopian nightmare. I just don't see it getting better. I don't think we're getting out of Afghanistan. I think they're talking about it, and there will be some bullshit and we'll end up staying because the opium makes too much money.
Yeah, but the thing is, the Taliban will kick America's ass unless they put in 50,000 troops. They want a full-scale war with a few thousand left, and they've had a ceasefire this whole time for the last year and a half. If that's canceled, then it could be really ugly. I don't think they really have a choice but to pull at least the troops out. I mean, they say they want to leave the CIA and all of that behind safe lines, but I don't know how they could try to hold on to Bagram without having to then put more troops back in, which they could do. I mean, I'm not fully discounting that, but I mean,
we're assuming we're dealing with rational people, and we're not.
Well, look, I mean, all of the arguments, and I think this is the consensus in DC.
Like the last 10 years of being Afghanistan have been stupid as hell.
But you can read it at Foreign Affairs, and you can read it in Foreign Policy, and you can read it in the Washington Post, even that, what, we should get out of Afghanistan. We need to pivot out of the Middle East to China. And you can read a lot of really great articles about Afghanistan that then have China as the end. And so
when are we going to get out of Germany and Japan?
No. But yeah, I mean, that was what they said about Biden. And Biden, there was a great article actually by Michael Hirsch in Foreign Policy about Biden, Blinken, and Sullivan had their meeting, and they came to the decision they want to call victory in the war on terrorism. They want to denigrate ISIS as nothing but a regional threat that can be dealt with by our friends and allies over there, and that core Al Qaeda is defeated, and fuck Al-Shabaab. Nobody ever heard of them anyway. We could just ignore that problem away, since it never really was a problem of ours. In the
ever
first
get our
place.
girls back from Boko Haram? Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, Michelle Obama was not one of those girls. Big Mike, Michelle Obama was not one of those girls. Okay, we have the evidence. I've looked at it. I got a text, guys. Everyone, I want to go around.
They always say though They always say though, so that we can be worse on China. That's why I'm saying it's credible to me that I think they mean this. It's because it's not out of the goodness of their heart. It's because they want to be worse on something more
move
important.
on to the next boogeyman. Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
I got a text. I want to go around. Everyone wants to know who your favorite U.S. president is and why. And mine is JFK. I got him right there behind me from the cover of JFK and the Unspeakable. He thwarted nuclear war, in my view, and he was amazing. He was a cut above. So many reasons I could go on, but JFK is my favorite president. Reed, who's your favorite president?
Probably Calvin Coolidge, and my favorite Democrat would be Garfield, I think, because he just didn't want to be president, didn't want to do anything, and then Calvin Coolidge. I mean, they all suck, so I don't really have a favorite, but I'd have to go with one of those two.
Scott.
Oh, this is too obvious. William Henry Harrison. He had good.
Oh yeah, he died. Right? Yeah.
Dropped dead.
Yeah,
One day.
Harrison's my favorite Beatle.
He's a model for how I think all presidents should behave.
Well, I'd say my favorite president was the one in between JFK and LBJ, whoever that was. Just
that was brain matter. It was brain matter. Okay.
Did you
Dawson?
see my video on RFK assassination the other day, Eric?
I did.
By the way, you can't say Jefferson Davis, Ryan. You got to choose a
I wouldn't say that anyway. He was not very good. I like Coolidge, maybe Madison or Washington. I think as president, Jefferson did well.
You like JFK though, Ryan?
I like. I mean, I don't.
For Massachusetts, I was born in Massachusetts.
I think he gets overly romanticized because he was shot. He and McNamara were not going to get out of Vietnam like everybody thinks, and did
he thwart nuclear war, Ryan?
Yeah, but he's one. Our own policies got us into that mess in the first place, right? It's like, okay, we'll move our weapons out of Turkey if they get out of Cuba. Why do we have weapons in Turkey? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
But he was definitely he was very hard on Israel. We haven't had that ever, right? He wanted to expect them for nuclear weapons. His brother supported right of return for Palestinians. So the Kennedys are very good on something that everyone else is terrible on. So I get, but Coolidge was more like our best free market president since the beginning, at least. And then Jefferson.
That reminded me of earlier when you asked about H.W. Bush. Him and Baker did withhold money from Israel as long as
that's what I was talking about, Scott. Settlements.
Yeah, and you can listen. You can read at amandaweiss.net. He has the quotes where Bush Sr. blamed the Israel lobby for his loss against Clinton. Which I don't think he says that they were behind Perot or anything like that, but just that they had the media just go full tilt for Clinton and against him, and that was why there was a quote where, and I don't know how in jest this was meant or the exact context of it, but in print it looked really bad, which was James Baker saying, "F the Jews, they don't vote for us anyway." And so then they were like, "Yeah, but you know what? We donate and or we withhold funds. So how do you like that?" And so
you like them apples.
It really seemed to matter a lot. And Mondo Weiss has written this up pretty well.
So the early presidents were good for America, but it's hard for me because all of them were murdering Indians, right? So that's hard for me to swallow.
Yeah, Jackson was great on economics, kind of bad on the Indians.
Yeah, Jackson and Jefferson challenged the bank and
the Indians.
Well, and Jefferson's trade war with England was horrible and led to the Second War with Britain.
Yeah. But they did give us the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the Louisiana Purchase, and it's a, whatever. It's hard for me. You ask me this what's the best tasting dog food? You're asking me about government.
I know. Well, who's the most based president? Or no, let me. Who's the most based foreign leader or leader in any time of a country or republic, a dictatorship or anything? Who's the most based?
Well, would it based meaning just said what he thought and regardless of what everyone else thought? So we're not talking good or bad, just based.
No, just super based.
Trafficant.
The congressman.
That count.
I don't
Ron
know.
Paul.
I was about to say Scott. Ron Paul.
Politician.
Ron Paul does it for me, man. I've never heard someone breathe more fire and more truth.
Russell Means.
Yeah.
He lost to Ron Paul by 1 vote in '88. and he was based as hell. He never got recognized the way Paul did, but they were pretty much on par.
Yeah, he was a good dude. I interviewed him one time.
I know. I asked you to interview him, and then
you did?
And then you did.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a cool guy.
He's all you'll never see if you want to see, because John McCain used to be the head of the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Oh man,
dealt with him for a long time. But
wow,
if you see Russell Means talking to Congress about Indian sovereignty and like all the things they need to do to fix it, everything he said is exactly what needs to be done. And they're just like, and guess who's listening to him? Joe Biden. And they just ignored him,
Yeah.
But everything he
guys,
said about the BIA is how you need to do it.
We just hit 2 hours and my computer's going to die here soon, so we'll wrap it up. But this was awesome. It fluctuates how much I talk for each of these. It kind of varies, but this was great. The conversation was great, and really appreciate all you guys.
To read?
There's like 50 of them.
Oh well.
I can't.
Charlie, I was going to say a lot of things.
Yeah, I showed them on the screen. I can't even access all of them because I have so many.
Epic.
I purposely toned my Mike hogging down because I'm on all the Horsemen, so I don't have to. I could have went ham on 9/11, but I was like, no, shut up. I didn't talk about it.
I didn't want to fanboy too much, Scott. Man, it's an honor, dude, to have been on this with you, man, and your knowledge is it's I don't know if you're unrivaled, dude, in your knowledge of the interviews you've done, the people you've talked to. So this for me, just telling you that this was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on, man. And
thanks, man.
We got to get it out to the people. And I do comedy, I do shows and stand up and impressions, and all that. So I think mixing it all together, and it's all about liberty. It's all about speaking your mind, and just it's not worrying what other people say about you or think about you. So I have watched a lot of what you've done, and I appreciate what you've done. And this has truly been epic.
Ah, cool. Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate that.
I think when Ramondo passed away, myself and a lot of other people, one of the first things we thought is, well, we still got Scott.
Yeah,
because there was nobody, no offense, nobody on his level. He got a little cranky or whatever, but like that, he just would come up with stuff and then he'd be right, and like he'd be already on the next thing. And he's like, a year ago he said da 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 da, and I don't know.
No question about that. I mean, he's in the Bush years, especially. He was the most important writer in America. Just period.
He'd have a hero on the hill sometimes, whether it was like Fitzgerald, he thought was going to go after AIPAC and all that, and then later it was like Hagel and stuff. But whatever, man.
Hey, we're going to shout Cynthia McKinney. Cynthia McKinney is a based queen.
I'll tell you what, Rye. If I didn't have the show and the Institute and all these other things, and my only job was writing 3 articles a week for antiwar.com, the way that Justin had it, I don't, trying my very best, I don't think I could do what he did. I could see myself trying to do that, like really writing up-to-date articles on current events and trying to be the best columnist I could be on a real-time basis like that. But right now, I just can't do it. I'm spread so thin. The only times I write an article is if I'm so goddamn mad, I just cannot help but knock out 1,000 words. But anything short of that, I can't motivate myself really to write,
It's harder when you have children, too. He didn't have any kids. So.
It's a busy life over here, for sure.
Let's do the plugs and just any final thoughts. But Eric, why don't you give us we haven't heard much from Alex, but just let's hear from Alex what we think about what really happened on 9/11, and then give your plug, I guess.
First of all, folks, it was the Chi-Coms, right? The Chi-Coms were doing it. They were in concert with the Saudi. I mean, the Saudis were kind of involved, but not really. Okay, Infowars.com. But it was the Chi-Coms. It was totally a Chi-Com thing. Go to Infowars.com/dickpills right now to get my pills. You're fighting the Luciferians and the Rockefellers and the CFR and all those people in the Bilderbergers. You need to stay strong and hard. You go there. I'll give you the pills. I'll give you the knowledge. I'll give you the power. Infowars.com. But I just want to say
you got to get Humagard in here.
I do. I know.
You got to play some my head commercials.
But no, I want to say that this is epic, man. People are craving people speaking their mind, freedom of speech, exchange of ideas. shit they're not going to hear anywhere else. I mean, I look at mainstream media now, and I just can't even look at it. It's a joke. It's just a fucking joke. It's one thing I loved about Trump. He shit on all of them. When he was in there, he said, Joe Scarborough, let's talk about the intern in Joe Scarborough's office. Let's talk about Mika Brzezinski's botched plastic surgery. She was bleeding everywhere, and she begged me to come to Mar-a-Lago. At least that was funny. That was fucking hilarious. I love what Trump
He's
did
entertaining for sure. I mean, it's he's the most entertaining.
He's entertaining, and he's the king. He's the emir. But Jackman Radio on Twitter at Jackman Radio. Subscribe. Everyone who's watching, subscribe to Jackman Radio on YouTube. Gonna have all these guys on. We're gonna keep doing this. We're gonna fucking ride it till the wheels fall off. I'm on Instagram every day. Senator Jackman's my personal account. Jackman Radio's the podcast account, and we're on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, Apple, and I'm on Locals. Tulsi Gabbard is on Locals with Dave Rubin and some other people. They're trying to get that going, and I got to tell you, nothing's censored there. There's no ads, so if you like that kind of thing, go on to locals.com and check it out. But it's been an honor riding with you guys tonight. And the Four Horsemen, we're going to keep going.
Absolutely. Yeah, Ryan, I know that I made your Twitter. It got banned. You made one. It's getting screwed up already, but
where can in like 3 minutes.
But
so all that stuff that Jackman just said, I'm banned on that whole list, as well as all the, I don't have Facebook or Instagram. I lost a 50 million view YouTube channel. I was ahead of everybody, and then that's the 5th time they did that to me. So I just basically have my own website, ancreport.com. I use something called PeerTube, which is on an Indian reservation, so they can't take it away from us. We've got server farms all over the place, and ANC stands for anti-neocon. So it's the anti-neocon report. There's a forum there because all I used to do is write articles, and then I just started with videos at some point. But so that's where all my stuff is on my website, and I had things periodically, and they always get taken away, so I never feel confident in plugging them because I'm like, well, a week from now it's probably not going to exist. Yeah. So that's how that is. But you get flack when you're over the target, I guess. I think I have a dedicated cult that just follows me around and flags whatever I do to try and get me removed. I barely say anything. I'm like, everyone else in the same libertarian circle that I was in was saying the same kind of stuff, just like worse than me. And but I'm the one that gets hit. So I don't know. But
just you made yourself a good couple enemies out there somewhere, Rye.
Yeah.
Gabe Hoffman's one of them. But by the way, since Maria Farmer's listening, Jackman Radio and myself did a really long, in-depth thing on Jeffrey Epstein. If you haven't heard it, check that one out.
Well, just like on Jackman Radio, you're always welcome on here. I actually kind of enjoy the reaction I get from the cucks when I bring you on here, so it's kind of fun at this point. But
they're so dumb. I'm like, I'm alive. You can talk to me. Like if oh, what's your thing on the Holocaust or this or that? I'm like, just ask me, asshole, and I'll tell you. It's not what everyone's saying
that
about
was it.
And
I had to tell people, Ryan, that your grandfather served in World War II. My grandfather did. My great-uncle was killed in France by the Nazis. That doesn't matter, though, to people. But
my
that's neither here nor
grandmother
there.
fought a Nazi spy. Kicked him with a horse. An Austrian
well,
spy was in North Carolina, and her mom captured him. And it's like my granddad gets home fighting in Okinawa and this and that, and finds out his girlfriend is getting to meet the president because she caught a spy.
All right, Scott, what about you? What's going on other than the Billy Crystal interview, and where can people keep up with you?
Well, I'm the director of the Libertarian Institute. That's libertarianinstitute.org, and I'm editorial director of antiwar.com. And you can find my show at scotthorton.org. I got 5,500 something interviews going back to 2003 at scotthorton.org and at youtube.com/scotthortonshow. And I wrote those books, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, and this way, Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. And over here is the great, this way. The Great Ron Paul is the collection of transcripts. All of my interviews to Ron Paul. But the light blue one there, Enough Already, that's the new one. That's my take on all the wars since Jimmy Carter, all the Middle East wars since Jimmy Carter. A guy on Amazon recently called it the Necronomicon of American foreign policy, which I liked. So
Ash
that's
would be
pretty
proud.
much everything that pisses me off in one book. If anybody wants to take a look at that, and I'm on Twitter at Scott Horton Show for now.
I thought you were going to say Woodrow Wilson is your favorite president.
Well, yeah, he's still my favorite one to talk about. That's a whole other 2-hour show.
Yeah.
I forgot I have a book, The Separation of Business and State. I was not banned on Amazon
I
yet.
have on the pile over here, by the way.
Knock on wood. Well, it's an audiobook now, so if you like doing something else, you can just listen to it.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just
All right,
I'll gift it to you.
Thanks everyone for coming on. This was great. Thanks everyone for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, hit the bell so you get notifications when I put out a new video. I am now on Spotify. I'm on Anchor, so anywhere where you can find podcasts, just look up The Naturalist Capitalist. Our next Four Horsemen is going to be with Clint from Liberty Lockdown on July 11th. So stay tuned for that. Thank you very much.